Go.
Okay, great. Good evening. I'm going to call the special meeting of the Board of Education to order on April 27th at 6:02, and we're going to start with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we get started, I do want to put a shout out to our IT department, to Ken and Drew for all that they've been doing in the last few days, especially to put this together in order to open up as much as possible for the community to be able to participate either visually or auditorily or public comment or whatever. And I'd also like to thank all of you for being here tonight. The second item of agenda is our approval of the agenda. Just state your name when you state your motion, because I'm not sure if the recorder will know who you are. So I need a motion to approve the agenda.
Second, Lindsay.
Okay, and who made the motion? Me? I guess I did.
Oh, well, I'll make that motion then.
Okay, so made by Lindsay and seconded by?
I'll second it.
By Jason. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, item number 3 is the superintendent's discussion and board questions. And I want to state why this meeting was called. First of all, I believe back on, a couple of us on the board were made aware of the fact that Calvin Terrell was going to be speaking to our students, our staff, as well as our community. And a little bit of time went by, and I remember on April 13th, which was approximately a week later, after getting a few emails and doing some research, I decided that we really needed to have a special meeting, in order to get information out, to find out exactly how Mr. Terrell was recommended, how he was vetted, what the district was expecting of his conversation. I felt this was important for the board to know, as well as for the community to get some factual information. Unfortunately, because of the spring break, and then because of COVID, we're here tonight, which is at least another week or two later. So had we not had those other pieces intervene, we would have had this meeting at least a week earlier, week and a half or earlier. So that said, I'm going to turn this over to Doug, who can give us some information. And I'm not sure if you have someone else you're going to introduce.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Members of the board, staff, community, whoever's chiming in. First, I want to thank you all for changing the date of this meeting and switching the format to Zoom to accommodate me, basically, and maybe a couple others who suffered COVID-related illnesses recently. I'm looking forward to hopefully being in person with you all at our district meeting next Monday. So hopefully that will happen. Some of what I'm going to share is a repeat of information that I presented to our board wellbeing committee on April 5th, but I think it's important to share the same information with all of you, as well as others who were not in attendance that day. I'd like to start by reading a few of the notes that I shared with the board actually back in June of 2021 during my superintendent transition report, and try to relate those thoughts to the issue that brings us together tonight. This is what I said that night. I'm reading from my script that night. The relative lack of racial, socioeconomic, and language diversity in RSD13 concerns many of our learners, families, employees, and residents. The district recently adopted an equity policy that strengthens its commitment to all learners, but we will need to continue to work diligently to make every learner and family feel safe at school and fully included in all school-related functions. Those expressing concerns about the district's historical response to racial and other inequities did not generally characterize the district as being overtly racist in its daily practices. Instead, they shared concerns about systemic inequities within the district that have existed for decades or longer. They also worry that our learners may be somewhat unprepared to successfully navigate life after high school in places that are much more diverse than what they experience living here and attending our school. So those are my reflections after being here for about 6 months. And nothing I've seen or heard since then has changed my perception. However, just in the past couple of months, I've had the opportunity to hear the actual stories of a number of our learners. And I've begun to understand more clearly how they have felt since the time they entered our schools in elementary school, simply because of the color of their skin. These stories are heartbreaking and difficult to hear. And I hope they motivate all of us to work together to make things better. So I asked some of these learners that had shared their stories what they thought the solution to this challenge might be. And, after a pretty long discussion, they all agreed that changing a culture, which is really what we're talking about, could not happen overnight. They made a lot of good concrete suggestions, several of which we've already put into place, and we talked about at well-being. And one of those included that we do something substantial that engages as many of their peers as possible, like an assembly, prior to the end of the school year, in addition to actions that engage our employees and our community as a whole. So as I described in some detail at well-being earlier this month, I think it's important to acknowledge that RSD13 has been involved in equity-related work for several years. We're not just getting into this right now, and that this work has continued to grow and evolve in response to the voices of our learners, who clearly want and expect more from us in this regard. One of our strategic partners in this equity work has been the State Education Resource Center, or SERC. And we've got Michelle and Dwight from SERC as our guests tonight, and thank you both for being here with us. SERC has been a trusted advisor to this district, as well as many others across Connecticut, and has also provided direct services to our learners, employees, and even members of this board. So, in the wake of recent events, we consulted with SERC about ways to move forward, both in the short term and in the future. Make no mistake, the work of transforming education is a marathon, not a sprint. If that analogy works for you, it definitely works for me. And no single event is going to bring about the change that we all envision. But when we asked our friends at SERC who they might recommend for our present circumstances, when we thought about an assembly, someone who could engage our employees and also our community, the answer was Calvin Terrell. Now, I realized that ever since we announced that Calvin would be coming to RSD13, we have received a significant response to that announcement, as well as a number of questions that Lucy articulated, which really is the primary reason for tonight's meeting. So I think it makes sense to start by asking Michelle from SERC to explain why their organization recommended Calvin to us, and then we can explain some other details related to the events planned for next week before opening things up to questions from board members and moving into our public comment. But let me preface this entire discussion with two important thoughts that are guiding this work. The first is, I believe that we have an obligation to make our schools safe and nurturing environments for all of our learners, and to make them feel appreciated and respected for who they are as individuals. That's number one. And number two is that we aren't currently meeting this obligation for all of our learners. And we haven't for a very long time. Now, if you disagree with either of those statements, then I don't think we should really be engaging in any of this work. Not with SERC, not with Calvin Terrell, not with anybody. However, if you do agree with both of those statements, which is my hope, then tonight's discussion becomes framed around not if, but how we best move forward. So at this point, Michelle, again, I'd like to thank you and Dwight for joining us tonight. Could you just jump in and share with the board, with our staff, and with our viewing audience why you recommended Calvin to RSD13?
Absolutely, Doug. Thank you. And good evening, board members, community members, and staff members. Thank you for the invitation this evening. And as Doug has just so perfectly described our point and decision making up to this point, we recognize one insert I would make that you received a lot of feedback, but not all negative, right? So there's been a lot of pros and advocacy and championing for the continued participation of Calvin's assembly next week, and then others who have a lot of questions. So we hope tonight will certainly facilitate, some of the congruence and unification of that information. So I actually had been a consultant for CERC for several years, and Calvin has been a speaker for us in different venues or arenas, most often or most commonly with youth and students, sometimes also doing some keynote addresses for educators, administrators across the state, but also smaller, maybe school or district-like settings. I think we certainly have a lot of speakers to draw from, both locally and nationally, just given who we are as an agency. But there is something very special and very unique about Calvin Terrell. And I think when we did an introduction with Doug and Corianne and Dwight and myself with Calvin, I think they were readily able to see the same thing. He is a human being who permeates harmony and unity, and really demonstrates in all of his being, not just in his work life, but in his personal life, in that regard. And what he is able to do in a very interactive, very candid way is engage with youth through music, through poetry, through some of his personal lived experiences, and really drawing out from them either similarities in experiences or differences in experiences. And so some of what CERC has engaged in the district with over the past several years includes some student focus groups, both at the high school level in 2019 and at the middle school level as recent as this fall. And so just as Doug is describing, we're hearing from the youth, we're hearing from the staff that some of the interactions within the schools, within the community setting aren't really great. And there have been within the last 60 days some very specific macro incidents that it no longer can be ignored. And so again, the perfect match for what Doug has just described as someone who's going to have the impact to help us to really reset and calibrate as a community, not only to heal from some of the recent events, but also to learn and understand more about each other and grow and move forward. Myself, again, we've used as an agency Calvin for many different things, but myself, I have been in his presence, in his setting, in his presentations between 4 and 5 times. 3 of those times were within youth settings, and other times they were in adult professional development. My personal journey, my impact of the presentations, of my participation, of my learning, particularly as a woman who is white and comes from a community that is more suburban-like, maybe not exactly right like Region 13, but certainly a larger community that does have more majority white community members, and are seeing very similarly to Region 13 some change in regards to who our community members are. And we need to start thinking about this too, right? And so the reflection that I engage in with Calvin also collectively, but as an individual, in learning more about myself and how I am either contributing unintentionally, right, unconsciously, but maybe also how I could be someone who could be an ally and someone who can stretch a hand, and through my kindness and through what I'm demonstrating, just be making this a better place. So again, both personally and professionally, we really thought, based on our experiences in Region 13, where you were at, what the request was, that he was the best match. And certainly we can take other questions, but I would also offer to my colleague Dwight, who is new to CERC, but not new to education or new to Region 13, who has not yet had an experience with Calvin, but has had some interactions with him in our planning for the Region 13 work that I'd like him to share as well.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you as well to everyone for the invite and for the presence here. I would echo everything that Michelle is saying. I unfortunately have not had the pleasure of being in the presence of Calvin, but for the small time that we have met with him prior to setting up everything for potentially next week, there is definitely a clear understanding that Calvin's focus is all about that healing and unifying of the community. And oftentimes when I'm in the presence of many facilitators in this work, because I've met a bunch, there's usually kind of a niche or like a specific particular sect in which people kind of flow in. So as Michelle said, your district is looking for somebody that can engage with the students, engage with the staff, as well as engage with the community. And that is something that is kind of unique to find, and that is something that Calvin definitely embodies. And given the recent events, not just in the last 6 months, but over the last few years, it is kind of evident that somebody that can bring in some level of healing and kind of a resolve and a reset, as Michelle said as well, Calvin really does fit that bill. And I'm hopefully looking forward to being able to actually be in his presence, and I hope that many of you could be there as well.
Thank you, Dwight. Thank you, Michelle. And again, we may have questions for you. The board members might. So, board members, to kind of take this to some of the other questions that had been sent to us. So we got this recommendation from CERC, and based on that, we kind of shared Calvin's information with our entire leadership team, which constitutes our principals at all levels and our senior central office staff. And as a group, we all believed that bringing him here made sense. But let me say this, because I think it's important. This goes back to my leadership training in the Navy. You can delegate authority, but not responsibility. So ultimately, the decision to bring him here was mine. And so if people are upset with that decision, they should be upset with me. But I do think it's important that that we didn't know about Calvin until CERC, our partner, recommended him to us. But as a team, we all believe in what he can bring to the district. I think based on what you just heard from Dwight and from Michelle, a number of us also had a chance to meet with Calvin for about an hour. It was Dwight, Michelle, it was Corey, it was also Jen, and also Cheryl and Deb. And they're all on tonight. And so I think it's important for you to hear that too, that we didn't just hear the recommendation, we also spent about an hour with him. And what we were trying to do is make sure that he understood what was going on here in RSD13 and what we were hoping and expecting that he would do if we indeed hired him. And what we asked him to do is to engage our secondary learners, our secondary employees, and our community in a conversation about bullying, discrimination, and related challenges. We talked about the recent events at Coginchaug as strong and some of the historical things that have happened here. And we specifically mentioned some of our historically underrepresented racial groups and what we had heard from them. We also clearly described our demographics. I wanted to make sure that he knew what our demographics are. And he reassured me and us that he had worked with communities that look just like us. I wanted him to know how our lack of diversity sometimes complicates these challenges in ways that, quite frankly, I've not experienced before in other districts, where I feel like I need help to do this work here because of our lack of diversity. Now, during this conversation, and this was a question that came up from a lot of folks, so I think it's important to get ahead of this. Calvin actually suggested that we go ahead and make opting out something that families could do for their children. That's based on his experience. He's fully aware how he's often perceived by those who have not met him or been part of his presentations. And he doesn't want to force any of our learners to participate in an assembly if their parents or guardians are strongly opposed to that. And, that made us feel better about this as well. And to my knowledge, in every place that I've been and the staff have validated that's true here in RSD13, parents have always had the freedom to opt their children out of participating in any type of assembly or educational activity, or really anything they find objectionable for any reason. And we always attempt to accommodate those requests. I think the difference here is, in this particular instance, we were proactive in putting that out there. And again, that was at Calvin's suggestion. Had he not suggested that, I don't think we would have done that, but he suggested that, and that's why we did that. Now, in terms of the contract itself, a lot of folks are asking that, and I think we've sent this to a lot of folks, and some folks have published this on social media, so maybe everybody knows this, but we're talking about $6,000. That is a kind of an all-in cost that includes his programming fees, but also his travel, his meals, his incidentals, all of those things. It's being funded through a Title IV grant, which is a federal grant, and we have others that can speak more clearly to that if there are questions about that. There's a question about if, based on tonight's discussion, if we decide to, cancel this thing, which I hope we don't, but if we did, what are we out financially? And we're out the entire $6,000 because we are very close to this presentation happening, and that would be unfortunate, but we want to be very transparent about what that would entail. And we've also had a question related to the contract about, I guess some folks are suggesting that we might rearrange the order of what we have planned for next Tuesday. Just as a reminder, we have a morning assembly planned combined for the learners of Strong and Coginchog at the high school. We have an after-school faculty training for the combined faculties of Strong and Coginchog, also over at Coginchog. And then in the evening, we have a community forum where we would hope that families, children, maybe especially those who aren't in middle school and high school that are interested, and community members would come and engage with us. And the question was, could we kind of reverse or change the order of that? And my response to that, having talked to our team, is that this contract was based on him basically being here about 24 hours, and his schedule is very tight. I mentioned before that the learners had really pushed us to get something done before the end of the school year, so that they see a commitment from all of us that we're serious about this. And it is very difficult to put something like this together on such short notice. And Calvin is in high demand. I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had 2 dates in May and June to even look at. And this is the one that worked the best for us. And so I don't believe we can rearrange the order in any way. We could certainly talk about, modifying this in some way if there's a piece of this that you don't want him to do. But we're going to pay him the $6,000 regardless. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking and turn it back over to Lucy, and let you know, Lucy, during the question and answers, I've asked the staff and also Michelle and Dwight, any of us can answer any of these questions. Whoever is best equipped to do that, I'll do it certainly if I can, but we want whoever has the correct answer to be able to answer as best they can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle and Dwight as well. A couple of things that I just want to throw out, and then I'm going to open it up to the rest of the board and perhaps ask additional questions. One of the pieces that you were talking about, Doug, was that the changing of the order. If it were something that were possible, it would involve perhaps a different amount of time that Calvin would have to put in terms of maybe one night. Like, let's say he had the community first, that would probably be an evening, and then the next day would be the students. Wouldn't that involve an additional cost as well to the $6,000 because of the day commitment?
It might. We haven't had that conversation with him, but it also might not even be practically possible because I don't know. Michelle or Dwight, do you know more about that, or Corey?
Yeah, I do. And thank you, Board Chair. He's actually coming in on a very late flight to make it for the early morning session at the high school. So an evening before session wouldn't be possible. The other thing to keep in mind programmatically is he really wants to invest his time with the youth, right? Because that's what we are centering this around, everything that Doug said. And then working with faculty and community based on the dialogues and conversations and site visits he did within classrooms throughout the course of the day. So programmatically, it's, it's very sound. It's an 8 to 8 day, as Doug said, 12 hours stretch. And then he actually returns to the airport and flies out on a late night flight to get back. He lives, cross country in the West. So, this is not something that is easily organized or coordinated. Like you said, with the extended time, we would have had to probably front load that sooner than at this juncture.
Does he ever provide some type of a syllabus for his, or an outline of what he's going to talk about? If not for the entire community, at least for the students?
Yes, we're actually, we met last night with the care team, and we have some information we're preparing on flyers that will be going to, obviously, Doug and Corianne for approval, but we do have that information available.
Which could possibly also be available for the families, the students' parents.
Yes, it's going to be a single, with the schedule for the day, with the narrative of what it's all about. Obviously encouraging and, supporting people's participation. Yes.
I have one other thing that I want to bring up, which I think goes right to the heart of what some of the controversy is. In terms of the emails we've gotten, it's been pretty much split almost half and half that we've received that were in favor and half that we received that were not. So there's a good split. I won't say nice, but there's a good split out there in the community. But there were a couple of words that both you and Dwight said. You talked about his Calvin's focus on harmony and unity and healing and community. But my concern comes in, and this comes directly from him. Some of the things that he has put out on social media are the exact opposite. And that's where I think the biggest concern is coming in. And I'm going to put it right out there because that's my biggest concern. I feel that he was well vetted, he was well recommended, but his social media comments don't seem to jive with your words of harmony, unity, healing, and community. And my concern too would be, how does he go from saying one thing on social media and then coming to a group of students and having a different focus?
Yes, so I don't know if you want that to be responded to, or if that was more just a rhetorical in the room.
No, I think I would like a response, because I think there's a lot in the community that have questioned this as well.
Yeah, and Dwight, I'll also ask your stance on this as well. So I think one thing we need to recognize is that Calvin has, to his core, deep integrity for what he, stands for and demonstrates, as I mentioned. With that said, he also has different partnerships. So he has some long-term relationships where he's doing work with, organizations, not all educational, over time. And he also has work like Region 13, where he has an agency like CERC, who's going to provide some of the follow-up support. So he's coming in to really do the spark, to do the reset and the support to get the energy rebuilt. So with that said, yes, Calvin is a truth teller. And Calvin has had a lot of lived experiences that mimic a lot of what we're hearing from the youth in Region 13. Of some racist behaviors, some very poor interactions, a lack of sense of belonging, etc. And that is where he relates with you so dynamically, because he's not afraid to share that. And he's not afraid to express, have you had something similar like this? Talk to your shoulder partner, talk to your neighbor, share that. Let's hear it in the room. Let's see where we are common to find where we have more of a lived experience and of understanding, because no one, right? Black, white, brown, indifferent, wants to have that experience, right? So I had my hand raised a little bit earlier because I think I heard Doug describing the lack of diversity in the community. And I think what I was hearing was the lack of racial diversity, because even in this setting, we are diverse, right? I don't think we all have the same thoughts, the same experiences, the same lifestyles, the same family structures, the same ways of worshiping, the same educational experiences. You know, I can go on and on and on, right? So there is diversity in Region 13. And that's one of the very first things that Calvin is going to celebrate and bring to the attention of everyone in the room, right? But he is also going to elevate the youth of color or youth who may be in biracial families or as experiences or have experiences outside of the Region 13 community, and elevate that too, right? He's going to show the value in who each of us are as individuals, but how much stronger we can be together. Now, you asked about how he does that. He is very astute. He's going to have sixth graders and he's going to have 12th graders. And Cheryl knows as a middle school principal, even the difference between a September 6th grader and an outgoing spring 8th grader. We can have young men walking in the hall that look like men and look like young boys, right? And so he's very aware of the fragileness of this youth within your district, particularly coming off some of the experiences that they have recently had within the district. He's not going to do anything, demonstrative to trigger, upset, traumatize anyone in that space. But he is a truth teller and he is going to ask for those truths to be told so that we can heal and move forward. May there be tears. May there be amazement. May I not know that my peer next to me has been suffering with this for so long, but that's where we're going to make the amends so that I'm also a part of this harmony setting or resetting within the community. So I don't know if you want to go ahead and add.
I can add just a little bit and kind of speaking from my own experience, one being a racial equity facilitator, but also being a person that is trained and practiced in restorative practices. And one of the methods of restorative practices really does involve creating a space where we can have that sense of trust so that we can create a sense of healing. But that does come from what exactly Michelle is saying, which is the truth. And sometimes that truth of a situation, that truth of an event, or that truth of an experience, it can be hard. But in order to heal, in order to move past it, we do have to face what caused the harm in the first place. And that's a very restorative practice-minded philosophy. And I believe that that's also a philosophy that Calvin is also utilizing while incorporating the racial equity piece. So I'm of the firm belief myself, but also of what Calvin is going to bring to us, which is peace and harmony through reconciliation and a recognition with what has happened. Because without going through it, without kind of acknowledging it, it gets kind of skirted underneath the rug. And at that point, it really isn't so much healing as it is just kind of a wool over the eyes. So to that point, I think that Michelle hit it on the head. He's a truth teller. He's going to tell that truth, but he is going to make sure that he handles it carefully and appropriately based on the students that are going to be in front of him, as well as the adults later on throughout the day.
Thank you. I asked that question because I myself am trying to figure out how a person, and it isn't just the racial piece. I mean, there's other anti-stuff that is on his social media that, I'm just having a hard time putting together what I'm hearing and what I've seen written. So that's where I'm coming from. And I'm just going to move on. I'm going to see if there are any other board members that have any questions. Are there any other board members that have any questions?
Sure. Hi, thank you all for being here. Yeah, the opt-out option at the same time seems healthy and good, but at the same time, I think it could be potentially divisive. I'm a bit worried that it's going to be common knowledge whom is choosing to opt out, why are they opting out? Maybe they want a free period. Maybe their parents are pressuring them to not go to this event. Maybe they actually want to go to the event, but they can't because of parents. That to me is the most troubling. It should be something that is for everybody and perhaps mandatory. So that is the most troubling to me. I don't know the man, he may be well engaged. The YouTube video was full of compassion and empathy. But then the social media thing that we basically learned of through all of our emails, ironically, both sides stated we're being influenced by a small minority. So the people for Mr. Terrell were saying, you guys are being influenced by a small minority, and the people against Mr. Terrell said we're being influenced by a small minority. I would probably suggest the larger part of the community would be okay with it, but the opt-out does bother me. He would be a wonderful, engaging speaker in a collegiate environment where somebody was with a differing viewpoint could kind of contrast it. I don't know that it's correct for our district. That's for us to decide. Probably what's best for the students is what we need to go with.
Are there any other questions that we have?
I guess one of my questions would be for administration or Doug, I'm not sure. Do we know what the kids are going to be doing that are opting out that do go to school that day?
Doug, I can answer part of that if you want. I mean, we would make a plan, Lindsay, for them to be engaged in some sort of work with an adult. We would not, high school, I'm assuming, as you guys know, I've been there a long time, that, it would probably be a study hall sort of thing. And we'd make sure that they, had something to do and were supervised, obviously. Cheryl, I don't know if you had other plans.
No, that was my plan as well, depending upon how many students opt out. But they would be supervised probably in the cafeteria, depending upon the number, and it would be a study hall, an opportunity for them to catch up on work, and it could be individualized depending upon the student need. But it definitely would be a supervised environment.
Okay, that does make sense. I think another thing I'm just concerned about is I'm concerned about a lot of these kids that are opting out, being singled out. Again, some of these kids, maybe would want to go, but they can't. So I think we need to be pretty mindful of that within the kids. And, I know that's in the back of your heads as well, but I think it's just good to publicly say that, it's very important for all these kids to feel, that they're not going to have some sort of adverse outcome, whether it's from peers or from teachers or from other parents. I just don't want to see people going home and saying, oh, so-and-so didn't go or so-and-so didn't go. It really has to be a true opt-out without prejudice.
Yeah, Lindsay, I think that's right. And I think kind of to both of your questions, my suspicion is, especially at the high school level, maybe even at the middle school, that a lot of parents who take the opt-out, they might not even formally opt their kids out to avoid that stigma. They might just not send them that morning. And I'm not encouraging anyone to be dishonest, but that's been my experience as an educator. Parents don't always want to give the reason why their children aren't in school. But to your second question, even if they go that route, people may connect those dots, but let's face it, somebody could be sick that day. I mean, again, I'm the poster child here for that. So somebody could be sick, and people speculate all kinds of reasons why somebody isn't there for that reason. Same could be true for some staff members. And, they could face the same kind of criticism from peers about, oh, you took a sick day because you didn't want to go to Calvin's training in the afternoon or whatever. And so I think you're making really good points.
This is Bob. Michelle, I saw in some of the background that Calvin has spoken at many schools throughout his speaking engagements. Do you know which schools he's spoken to in Connecticut?
I don't specifically know the schools, but I can absolutely get that information, Robert, for you by tomorrow morning. As I mentioned, the sessions that I've participated in have been youth conferences, either at a regional or state level, or adult professional learning. But I do know part of his time here has been extended when he's done keynote addresses or large youth events where he's gone then out to schools and districts and kind of piggybacked his time. But yes, I could get that information absolutely for you. And to Miss Lindsay, that was speaking about the concern regarding the judgments that may be made for youth that are or aren't participating either out of self-choice or parent choice. I think the fact that we have that great of a concern about the judgments that may be made, I think is very telling.
I agree with Bob. I think that I'd be very interested to know also the schools, especially in Connecticut, where he's spoken. I think from the pieces I've been able to hear of him, he sounds like a phenomenal speaker, someone who I definitely would want to listen to as an adult. I think he has a great message. Unfortunately, I feel that what someone had said earlier, that because of the social media posts, it has caused such a divide already, that I am concerned that there will be a huge majority of feedback with Lindsay's saying. I just feel that the majority of the kids that are going to be opting out, or the families that are going to be opting out, are the families that actually really should be there, or the kids that should be there. So I'm just concerned that we want unity. We want to come together as a community. And I just feel that I'm concerned that this is not doing what we. I also
You're kind of broken up more. I think we missed the last couple seconds.
I just would, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, so far.
Yes.
Okay. No, I know that Doug had also mentioned about how we've already booked this too, but as another option, I just would be very interested in making this more of a community thing. If people are more comfortable and it be like parents go with their kids. Because as I said, I think there's a lot of parents that are really interested in this. It's just really difficult to know with this age group, what is the discussion? What is being shared or taught? Or are there pieces of his own opinion and religious beliefs, as we've been emailed, that are incorporated, or political views? So I do feel, as a Board of Ed member, I just feel that it's our responsibility to know more of the material than to be able to just have someone come in and be able to speak. I know for employees who we hired, we definitely follow through on that. So I just, again, I feel like he's a great speaker for adults, maybe adult level thinking. But I would be interested more on who, especially in our own state, he has talked to at this age group, 6th to 12th graders.
As I mentioned, that's the majority of work that he's done in Connecticut for many years at a state and regional level, but I can absolutely get you the specific district and schools that he's worked with for those recommendations. Even in the adult learning space, he remains student-centered. That is who he, again, the voice, the student-centeredness, again, why we thought he was such a perfect match for Region 13.
And I don't remember the whole list. I did have a pretty significant list, but I know Windsor School District and Manchester School District did have him between 2014 and current. I'm not sure of the whole list though.
if I may, Lucy.
Absolutely.
I just want to echo what everyone else is saying. It's, I think we definitely need something, but with the social media aspect of this, the amount of emails that not even just emails, but people that have approached us even at athletic events and just leaving a baseball game this evening. There are a lot that I've spoken to that have a lot of concerns because of the social media aspect of this. I mean, we're trying to get our kids to be respectful, responsible, acting kind. And you look at some of the social media posts and how there's a divisiveness there. There's a lot of people who have a lot of concerns with this. So I just want to echo what everyone is saying, but there's a lot of concerns with that. So I tend to agree with it. I mean, there's a lot of people that, I mean, it's more of an adult learning, I think, than it is for our children. That's just my opinion.
And Lucy, if I may, I want to try to see if we could, if it's okay with you, stick with questions so that we can have our discussion after public comment.
Right. Okay. Are there any other questions at this point? Because if not, I mean, we can certainly reiterate some of the comments that we've made. And I know there's something else that I would like to bring up, but it's more of a comment than a question at this point. I don't want to open it up for a public comment until I'm sure everyone, all the board members have had a chance to ask their questions. Okay. If you think of something after, I'm sure when we come back and reconvene to speak, then we can always come back and say that. The next item.
I have one, Lucy, if that's okay. Sorry.
Sure. Go ahead.
Michelle, I had written it down. It was at the beginning. Is it our care team or is it the care team through CERC that you had mentioned?
It's the student care team from the middle school and high school. Okay. So there were some comments. I don't know if they were questions, so I'll pose it as a question. Are our students ready for this dialogue? I'll just turn it into a question. That answer is yes, right? Our students are actually more exposed than we were. I don't know if everyone's around-ish where I am in age span, but exposed to much more than we ever were. And so they are the students that we met yesterday afternoon, just blew Dwight, myself, and another colleague away in regards to where they're thinking, what they're motivated by, what they see their education being. And the majority of them were seventh graders. They're, again, it's a middle school and high school group, but they're very clear in this regard. And who was represented last night was about a group of maybe 15 of a 30 member group that is just growing and growing, again, exponentially. So I would not hesitate to, or relinquish, if you will, thinking that our students aren't capable for this higher level of critical thinking.
Thanks,
I would
Michelle.
agree with that, Michelle. If I could speak to that too, just recognizing the amazing just want and ability of comprehension level that a lot of your students have. And I think that's a testament to what's going on in your district and the fact that they are finding their voice to speak up for what it is that they are recognizing that is missing for them. I think that says a lot. And I, as an educator for many, many years, one of the things that I hold dear is just what are the students needing? What are they actually asking? Because sometimes they don't talk to us. Sometimes they don't tell us what they need, but to actually have a group of students that are being so brave to actually voice and speak to this, I think it says a great deal as to what it is that the students are asking you and the community for support and bringing to them so that they can become the full, well-rounded students that they, and scholars and career-minded folks that they want to be when they grow up.
Okay, I'm not saying anything, just waiting in case there's any other questions. Okay, we're going to move on to public comment. With regard to public comment, I'm going to take a few moments before we start for Drew to our IT coordinator to go over how to access and so that you can speak if you want to. I would also ask that we're going to stick to our 3 minutes, and Lindsay will be raising a timesheet, but she will also be saying something auditorily, not to, right, she made it nice and big. Yeah, not to interrupt you, not to be rude, but some of you may not be able to see us. So if you can't, she will raise it as well as tell you when you have a minute, I believe, and 30 seconds. And then when your time is up, and based on, I see 71 participants, I'm not sure how many of you are going to speak, but we would like all of you to have an opportunity to speak. And that, therefore, if you can hold to that 3 minute timeline, that would be respectful of all of us. And also, as you do speak, the focus at this point is we've given you an opportunity, all of us an opportunity, to get more additional background, more additional facts and information about this possible upcoming presentation. So hopefully that will have satisfied some of the questions that and concerns that some of you have. If the focus could be on whether you agree, disagree, why you agree or disagree, and perhaps some alternate suggestions, that would be extremely helpful all around. So I think, Drew, I'm going to hand this over to you if you want to go over with the instructions.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. Just a few things. Those of you joining via phone tonight, you can dial *9 at any time to raise your hand if you want to speak. I'll say the last 4 digits of your phone number when it's your turn, and you can dial *6 to unmute yourself. If you could then please say your name and town you're from before making your comment, that would be great. Those of you joining via Zoom, you just need to click the raise hand button to indicate you want to speak. Just listen for your name to be called and then click unmute to speak. And again, just state your name and town before making your comment. And I am going to preemptively apologize for mangling any names because it's going to happen. First up, we have Frank Amiralt. You can go ahead.
Hi, I'm Frank Amiralt, live in Durham, and I totally believe that we should all have an open mind. I did do some research on this guy because I didn't know what he was going to say. Looked at his social media, and the statement, "White lies matter more than black lives." Switch black and white around. Would this guy be even coming to town? I don't think this guy is right for our kids. I think he's a great speaker. I did watch his TED Talk and a couple other things. I wanted to be informed, and I don't like the message. It's divisive. So it's not me to say who should listen to anybody. I just feel that the way this was done, whoever vetted it made a big error, and it should be at best a Zoom call. That way nobody, like you guys said before, feels included or disincluded, or you didn't go or I didn't go, or, you know, I've heard some school members say, well, the kids' parents don't want them to go. These kids are smart. They can make their own mind up as well. But I'm an absolute no on this one. And I just wanted my voice to be heard. And I think the school district is amazing. I have a daughter that went through it, and she's going to be a teacher, and I couldn't be more proud of her. And my son is on the spectrum, and he has received nothing but love and care. And I can't thank RSD enough for that stuff. I am not anti-open opinion. I'm anti this guy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
Next up, we have 4744. You can go ahead.
Hi, this is Donna Reed from Durham. I want to echo the sentiments I heard from the board members, Lucy, and others. I'm assuming, Doug, that this wasn't presented to the board prior to this contract being executed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's correct.
So this was not presented to the board members before the contract was signed?
Yes, I said yes.
Okay, sorry, little. My other thing is I contacted the Secretary of State in Arizona, and it says that this person's business has been dissolved. He hasn't done filings in like 3 years. Do you know about that?
Generally,
You know-
public, yeah, generally public comment, we do not respond. I only responded to your first question. We just would like to have your comments, your statements, please.
Okay, no problem. I'd like to bring it to the attention. I read on his social media, and I'm very appalled by it. I agree that the students might need some guidance, but I also want to say that he's not for our community. Let me just tell you what he said that has me very concerned. Divided States of America, KKKA. I pledge compliance to the state of the Divided States of America and to the corporations for which it stands, or something. A white nation upon genocide, indivisible with hypocrisy and for all just us. We are the land of the thief, home of the slave. This is not someone that I would like speaking to our community. And I think that
1 minute.
this should have been presented. Yep. This should have been presented to the board before this contract was signed. I'm totally against this person. And I would hope that you would reconsider. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up is Audrey K.
Hi, thank you. My name is Audrey Kane, and I am a parent in Durham, Connecticut. I have a couple things that I wanted to say. I too agree that Calvin, although he seems like a great individual, I don't think it is something that is suitable for our children. I just did a quick Google search on him, and one of the articles I came across was from the Amherst Bulletin, and he had spoken with Amherst Regional Middle School. Excuse me. He spent the majority of his program focusing on role-playing, stories, games, and facts to engage children. But at one point, Terrell asked his audience to do something, quote, intense. He asked the students to close their eyes and visualize going to a community event with loved ones. He then asked them to visualize a gunman shooting and killing their loved ones. The next scenario involved the students imagining the funeral for the people who died during the shooting in great detail. I think a lot of the staff probably know my son, Evan Kane, who is intellectually disabled. He is also a very concrete thinker. If you were to ask him to imagine his family being slaughtered, he would have a very difficult time deciphering between imagination and reality. I'm sure this would cause emotional stress for him. Unnecessary emotional stress, in my opinion. For that reason, I will be keeping Evan Kane home on May 3rd. I also did another search and came across a YouTube video titled Virtual Equity of Keynote Speaker Calvin Terrell. It's from March 31st, 2021. In this video, he states that we are one human race, which I agree with, but he also goes on to state that we need to get white folks off the pedestal and Black people out of the pit to meet on the field of justice. He goes on to talk about ways that we have been passive and complicit in our lives and that no one is free of prejudice. Terrell gives the impression that whites need to atone for their sins and that stereotypes Blacks as oppressed. I do not agree with his line of thought, and for this reason, I will be keeping my older son home on May 3rd. One other thought that I just wanted to say was, it just seems like the school or the district, and by the way, I love the district, love the teachers, everyone that's worked with Evan and Ethan. It seems like they feel that the responsibility is on their shoulders to educate our children on racial issues, social inequities, and whatnot. And in my opinion, that is the responsibility of the parents, not the school. And that is just my opinion. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Next up is Marianne O'Brien.
Hi there. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm not going to speak pro or con. I'm just going to ask a question or two because I think a lot of comments have been made on social media and by the town in this meeting. So my question is, what are the objectives of his conversation and how will they be measured? How will we know that he succeeded in his aim? And are there follow-ups or is this a one-time deal? I think those are important questions because I think racial equity can't be solved in one talk. I think it's a very serious problem. I grew up in the city, way far from here. I've seen a lot. I would hope that kids going forward would be more tolerant, that they could get together. But, you know, I just wonder, this is a very controversial talk, it seems. So how is it going to be measured as to its success? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Nicole Bercolani.
Hi, thank you. I just want to start this conversation by saying that I do agree that there does need to be some type of programming or some type of outreach to both the community, students, and staff. However, I believe several members of this panel have said that the focus is going to be on safety. And in regards to safety, you have to consider the appropriateness, and you also have to consider the background of the speaker. I'd like to speak about licensure and training of this individual. Myself, I'm a nurse, and I had to go through years of training. I got a degree. I have to participate in ongoing training. And then once you become a nurse, you actually have to specialize in mental health. So it's something that also involves more specialty training. And then on top of that, it also involves specialty training when you enter. Oh, sorry, guys. Fire alarm going off. It also involves specialty training when you enter into pediatrics. I'm just gonna go outside for a second. It's dinner time in my house. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. So it also involves specialty training when you go into pediatrics. So my question is, what type of education does this individual have? What type of licensure does he have to be able to talk about trauma? And I believe both the SERC representatives said that there's going to be healing and traumatic experience. This obviously is going to be a very difficult conversation to have when it is had. So I just want to know how this individual was vetted and what type of actual training he has, what degree does he have, when did he graduate, where is he licensed to teach, because he also was described as an educator. I also wanted to just say that, sorry, I was definitely thrown off by that fire alarm. I also just wanted to say that, you know, I do think it has to be a conversation that's had. You know, what's the fallout from this conversation? One of the SERC reps also said that there's probably going to be some crying involved. It's obviously a very difficult topic of conversation. So how does the district plan to handle that moving forward once the speaker leaves the district? What's the plan for that? And one of the SERC reps also said that there actually isn't going to be any traumatization. Whose guarantee do we have on that? Is that coming from the SERC? Is that coming from District 13? Is that coming from the care group?
1 minute left.
Like, where are we getting that guarantee that there won't be any type of traumatic outcome for this for all individuals of all races? Because it is a very difficult conversation to have. So I guess in summarizing, I just wanted to really point out that there's liability here. You're dealing with adolescents, you're dealing with, you know, a huge mental health aspect in a time when these kids are under already immense stress. And while I do think that something needs to happen, I just wonder about the appropriateness of this. And I really am questioning the vetting that actually occurred when it sounds like there was just very brief conversations, brief interactions with this individual prior to establishing this assembly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, last 4 digits are 8956.
Good evening. I'm Leslie Paoletti, and first of all, I want to echo the first speaker about how smart the students are in our district. I have had the pleasure of working with some members of the board and the community and some outstanding students on the well-being committee of the Board of Ed. And the students really are amazing. So the fact that the students think this would be helpful to them and are supportive of this, they certainly are very articulate. They are concerned about issues. They want guidance, they want support, and I would be very reluctant to not offer something that would benefit them since they have taken so much initiative and asked for this. I trust them. I am not on social media. I have not vetted the speaker. I trust the administrators in District 13. I trust CERC as a consultant. But I do think it does seem that for a divisive issue, it's unfortunate that the process has turned out this way. And I think what it does show is that there is a tremendous need for efforts in this direction. I also served on the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee of the Board of Selectmen, and we do have some issues in Durham. I've lived here for almost 50 years, and the issues of equity were not so bad when I first came, and it maybe reflects our whole society, but I do think it's an issue that needs to be addressed. I also agree that it's going to take a lot of time, whether this is the best first step to take. I'll leave it to you to decide, but I do think that we have to not put our heads in the sand, and we
1
need
minute
the
left,
best
please.
expertise. And thank you all very much for your interest, and I think that comments that have made will help the board figure out how to do this in a thoughtful way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Mike Sharon.
Good evening. My name is Mike Sharon. I live in Durham. I'm speaking tonight to once again urge the superintendent and Board of Education to not move forward with the Calvin Terrell presentation scheduled for this upcoming week. As I mentioned in the email I sent previously, there are many things that have been said by Calvin Terrell on his social media accounts that I believe disqualify him from being an appropriate speaker to present to RSD13 students. To respect everyone's time, I'm only going to share a few examples of what I've personally seen. In one image Calvin Terrell created and shared on his social media account, he compares European explorers and European migrants to a cancer. The image features an arrow pointing to Europe with the label "First Malignant Growth." Another arrow pointing from Europe toward North America is followed by the words "Cancer cells colonize," and shows 3 ships, one labeled with the ships Columbus took to the Americas, another with the ship the Jamestown settlers took, and finally the Mayflower. Another arrow points to North America with the label secondary malignant colonies. Regardless of the point he's trying to make, I don't believe it's respectful or appropriate to label a group of people based on their nationality, ancestry, or skin color as being a cancer. This is dehumanization and completely unnecessary to move any discussion forward in any type of productive way. There are numerous examples of Calvin Terrell labeling conservative parents who have shown concern about what their children are learning in schools as white nationalists and fascists. These few examples are only the tip of the iceberg, but anyone who's done their background research on this speaker is probably already aware of that. I was raised with the belief that name calling and stereotyping is bullying behavior. I personally don't feel it's appropriate that we bring in someone who has consistently engaged in this type of behavior to present about bullying to our children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Heidi Johnson, Durham. I have a son and a daughter at Strong School. As a family, we're looking forward to the speaker. And I think something to keep in mind is that given the community discussion about this event, the kids have already been on his socials. The kids have already been discussing at school who's opting out, who's attending, why, whether they would prefer to attend and their parents don't want them to attend. This is all out there. And as a family, what we consider is whether our discomfort as a white family is more or less important than the needs of kids in school, kids of color who are experiencing, negative interactions with peers. I forget the word you guys used, but the most significant incidents, which I just don't think can be ignored. I think some discomfort is going to be necessary for us to move forward, and I'm in favor of the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Laura. I have 3 kids in district. I'm in Durham. I want to start by applauding the superintendent's attention to this important issue. It definitely is something that needs to be addressed. I want to give an alternative. I am a employee in a neighboring town, and we just had a very there was a new curriculum put in place over the last couple of years of social emotional learning, and it's the Choose Love movement. And it actually echoes our core ethical values very, very well. What it does is it talks about creating a safer and more loving school community. Is created by the mother of a Sandy Hook victim, but she's not talking about gun violence. She's actually talking about how behaviors in the school could have possibly, or behaviors could have possibly prevented the tragedy. I emailed Chairwoman Petrella about it earlier, but it was probably about 6 o'clock because I myself have gone from professional development to meetings all day, so I apologize. It was after the meeting started, but the basic message is kindness, and I don't think anyone in the district would have any kind of concerns with a basic message of kindness and how being kind to others is going to be what affects the district the most. It's a K-12 curriculum that starts all the way to kindergarten, age appropriate up to high school. She spoke at the school I work at a couple of weeks ago, and it went over exceptionally well with the students. There was no concerns that I'm aware of from parents, and it really did cause a lot of discussion with the students that we were able to follow up with. So it's just another alternative that we might be able to consider.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Antonio. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm from Durham.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. My name is Antonio Almodovar. I'm in Durham, and I haven't vetted the speaker. But my concern is that if anyone's going to influence my children, it would be me, the parent. I'm not opposed to the speaker coming and sharing their information with staff, so they would be able to do their jobs a little bit better in identifying potential issues in the student body. And I'm not even opposed to the speaker coming and speaking to high school students who are about to embark on potentially college life, where they may interact with a bigger diverse group than they're used to. And diversity is very important. I am Puerto Rican. I was born and raised in New Haven, and I have been in the public service sector my whole adult life. So I've been exposed to quite a bit. And I understand that, again, that diversity is very important, and it takes time to change the culture, like the superintendent said. But based on some of the things that I have heard, I'm opposed to divisiveness. I'm opposed to rhetoric that creates guilt. And I'm opposed to someone that's going to plant a seed potentially in my child's brain. My child is 12 and 11 years old, that is going to make them doubt who they are. Because when it comes right down to it, when it comes to diversity, when it comes to differences, when it comes to equity, it's about respect. It's about respect and about knowing each other, knowing who you're talking to, who you're dealing with, getting to know a person. If you don't take the time to respect another human being, and you don't take the time to get to know them, okay, then that's where the problems lie. And I'm familiar with the concerns in the school, especially with the issue that occurred recently, and that's sad and tragic. But we also need to hold the parents accountable. And if the district wants to bring in the speaker to share their knowledge, their experience, their information with the staff, I'm okay with that. If they want to have an open forum for any parents that wish to attend and listen, I'm okay with that. I'm just not okay with an outsider that I'm not really familiar with. Being a minority myself and having my fair share of life experiences, I think I'm perfectly capable of teaching my children respect for each other, respect for other human beings, decency, and diversity. So as far as the speaker goes, in sharing their knowledge and information and opinion with the students, I'm opposed to that. I'm not opposed to them coming in to speak to staff and to have an open forum with any parents
1 minute
that wish
remaining.
to. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next up is Sophia Stephen. It looks like Sophia is using an older version of Zoom and she can't speak currently.
Do we want to try coming back to her?
Sure. We'll move on to Mary or Silas Hart.
How you doing, guys? My name is Silas Hart. I am a Middlefield resident, a proud parent of 2 kids in the Coggins school system. My son graduated a couple of years ago, and pretty awesome district. I moved here from Meriden for, this school system, and I just appreciate what you guys are doing. As the single parent of two half Hispanic and white kids, and a husband of a proud Haitian American, I applaud you guys for the conversation that you're wishing to have. I think it needs to be had. The issue is, and I think that I can kind of second everybody's opinions on this call, the issue is the vessel in which that conversation comes from. And the conversation isn't up for debate. It needs to happen. Everybody needs to understand, what minorities face in our community and across the country. But when you have somebody come in without properly vetting them, without having a proper kind of outline of what they're going to be discussing, I mean, that is very dangerous and irresponsible. If we have a outline of the particular subjects in which Mr. Terrell is going to discuss, and as parents of the school system, we can decide at that point if we want to have our kids involved. I think that is a lot easier and better to absorb. But to just have us blindly need to agree to let our kid go to this, or disagree to let our kid go to this, is really unfair without properly informing us with what my wife, who is an attorney, would call due diligence. We need to know what is being discussed. We need to know what's going to happen, and we don't. So for the district to ask us as parents to make a decision without informing us of what we need, it's unfair as parents. And to hear, just my personal opinion, that the parents that decline will have their kids sit in a cafeteria together, it just doesn't sit right with me. I think the conversation can be had with everybody. I think the conversation can be agreed upon by everybody, because racism exists and everybody can agree on that. But having somebody come in who may speak divisive, who may not send the right message that we want, is not appropriate. It's not appropriate. And unless we are armed with the information as, for what we need to make that decision, I can't send my child. And that's sad, because she might benefit from the conversation, but because I don't know what's going to be discussed, I can't take that chance. And that is all. And again, I appreciate that you guys are having this conversation. As a man who's in an interracial marriage and has interracial children, it's needed, but we have to protect our children at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Juan Steven.
Hello, I'm Sophia Stefan. I wasn't able to access the meeting from my Chromebook because the older version of Zoom, but I'm a sophomore speaking on behalf of the Students Against Racism group at Cognjog. And we are working at the student level to combat inequality. And first, I'd like to thank Dr. Shook, Ms. Griffin, and Mr. Sharp, as well as all supportive administration, for speaking on behalf of the student body. And I believe that Dr. Shook's preface in describing our situation was very accurate, especially from the students' perspectives on the matter. And we as students realize that we also have a responsibility to our peers affected by injustice. So our group has been working to instill that change in the student body. And Dr. Shook has already addressed many of the things we plan to mention, as well as the sum of the points made in an email that we sent to the board on Sunday by our group. This email included a list of student-reported incidences regarding discriminatory injustices, as well as a list of big picture goals that we hope to accomplish. This email also included a request to continue reaching out to trained professionals like Mr. Terrell to solve these specific crises and for transparency with students and staff, which falls under the umbrella of just formally recognizing the systemic issues that we are facing instead of pretending like they don't exist and allowing these issues to continually affect us. And finally, we asked that stronger guidelines for discipline and/or responses for issues specifically in the classroom, as well as others, be established and promoted by the board. And in regards to Mr. Terrell's social presence, I think myself that it's important to know from a student perspective that, in my opinion, I believe that we are able to recognize and comprehend our own thoughts from someone else's, especially since we as young people have grown up with social media and are used to sort of weeding out what makes sense from what doesn't. And as well as this, it makes sense that we should be able to receive information from all different experts in order to become people and fully develop our opinions just in general. And I feel that kids, especially middle and high schoolers, cannot and should not be protected from the prejudices of the world forever, especially those concerning their own privileges. Learning from the mistakes of the past is how we make positive changes for the future. And it's why we learn history in school. And we listen to people's experiences and other things that some of us have just never experienced, not through fault of our own race and things that we can't control, just by the way that things happen. But regarding the Students Against Racism, if anyone has any other specific questions regarding this, we have an Instagram account at against_racism.rsd13, or you can email Julia Talbert Slagle, who created the group. And thank you for your time and all that you've done so far.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Becca Gidney.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I'm from Durham, and I knew going to school here that I wanted to raise my kids here one day. My son is a minority student. He graduated last year, and unfortunately, his experience in the district is not the same as my experience. And he's come out of school with the impression that everyone in this town is a racist. And that makes me really sad because that's not what I wanted for my child. I do believe that it is the parents' job to teach their kid at home, but unfortunately, what a lot of these students are being taught is quite frankly disgusting. And it's evident on social media, and it's obviously evident with the things that have been taking place in the schools, and that nothing's being done about that. So I commend you for making a decision and trying to make a safe place for the students. And obviously they're the ones crying out wanting this, and that's who we need to be listening to. And that's it.
Thank you.
That appears to be it for current speakers. Up, we have a few more coming up. Next up is Carol Buffetis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Carol Buffetis from Middlefield, and I am very excited about the possibility, which I hope goes through, that we would have Mr. Terrell spend the day at District 13 on Wednesday. And Doug, I want to thank you so much for finding this person. And Michelle and Dwight, I also just very much appreciate what you're doing in the world and how you're really helping so many kids throughout Connecticut. And this is key. And I guess I would just say that I've heard so many people tonight say, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what's going to happen? We have no idea how every child is going to take this information in. And I think I have two kids, they're older, they went through the school system, and I wish that they had had more experiences like this. They're very savvy, wonderful kids, and are both with people of color, and they're obviously white. And at the same time, until they left the school system, they never really got to be with a lot of diversity. And one of the things they've said several times is, I wish that we'd had more of this available to us, what's happening in the world now. And I noticed that most of the people that spoke tonight are against having this process continue on next week. And I don't know how all of you are going to make this decision, but I think it's such a good thing for our community. And people just trust the process. Don't get all hung up in what's going to happen. The right thing is going to happen for each kid, and it is going to be a transformational experience. And guess what? Transformation oftentimes is uncomfortable, it's disruptive, but I think we need to give our kids a lot of credit for being able to handle this, and that they are going to feel, I think, much more connected to their community of other students.
1 minute left.
That's all that I have to say.
Thank you.
Next up is Doug O'Rourke.
Hi, this is Doug O'Rourke. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, we hear you. Hi, sorry, I'm picking a child up. Good evening. I first wanted to say what a wonderful school district this is. I have 4 kids in the district, 2 at Strong, 1 at Brewster, and 1 at Memorial. We are recent transplants from Middletown. So our 2 older ones obviously went to the Middletown school systems, and we moved here during the pandemic a couple years ago. So far, we've had a great story here in Middlefield. We're residents of Middlefield, and you guys do a great job here at District 13. I do agree with a lot of the other callers about Mr. Terrell. I do believe that we do need diversity training here in the district. I'm not opposed to the kids learning about diversity and equity training in the school environment. I'm actually a municipal employee who works in another town, and we recently had diversity training where I work, and it was a great training. You know, we got to air out our differences and talk about the past and talk about different people's prejudices in a safe environment. And I think there was some healing that came from it. My opinion on Mr. Terrell is we're going way too far in the other direction with this particular speaker. I believe that there are other people that we could bring in to do this type of training that are not as divisive as he is. And, you know, the comments from some of the other callers previous, you know, quoting what they read from his YouTube videos and his social media, which we've all watched and we've all read, speaks for itself. In my opinion, very divisive comments. So I am very opposed to the speaker. My kids will definitely not be attending it. With that being said, we are not opposed to some sort of diversity training in the future from a different speaker. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Next up is May Morello.
Hi, Megan Morello from Rockfall. I just wanted to say that I agree. I had some hesitation when I received the email, mostly because of the opt-out option that automatically makes it seem divisive to me. Also, I wasn't a huge fan of my 6th grader going over and joining the high schoolers. He's grown up quite a bit being at Strong this year. He went in there pretty young, and let's just say 6th grade has made him grow up a lot faster. And we've had conversations that I honestly did not think that we would be having at this age, but we're having them. I guess I wanted to say I see why it's divisive. However, at this point, it's already paid for, and it was paid for through a grant. We have the option to opt out. I'm still on the fence personally, but with opting out, we can see how successful opting out of masks has been. I work in the district. I haven't seen any issue. Some kids are masked, some kids aren't. No one says anything about it. As to the social media comments, I personally left Facebook because I could not believe how the members of our community spoke to each other. And they were people that I knew in person and like and respect. So as for social media comments, I find that I hate social media. People say things in a context or a different context. And as Doug, I think, mentioned, he is doing it in different phases so that it's directed to 6 through 12, which I do think is a wide range that it could be directed towards. However, And then parents. I'm leaning more personally to going to the parent session with my child so that I can see what's presented. I would feel better if there was that pamphlet that was talked about so I could know exactly the message. And one thing about the traumatizing, I personally remember learning about the Holocaust in middle school, and I was traumatized. I mean, I was devastated to learn that humans could be so cruel to each other. But the truth is, humans are cruel to each other. And the more we talk about it and bring light to that, maybe people will realize how cruel we're treating each other. Again, I just think we've already paid for it, so it's silly to throw away the money. Let people opt out of it. I wouldn't say cancel it now. Just give everybody the choice, just like we've done. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Next up is Maureen Funk.
Good evening. First, I just want to say congrats to the National Honor Society inductees who are probably already inducted right now at the high school. So that's awesome. And I think they should be congratulated. Thank you to the Wellbeing Committee and Dr. Shook. I think that this is not only necessary, but appropriate. And I fully support the speaker and all of the planned events. I would also say that there seems to be a fair amount of opposition, yet very few suggestions as to what should be done. And Mr. Sharp and Miss Griffin, this is the work they do for their lives. These are people that have dedicated their lives to bringing equity and justice where it's needed. And I think that we should trust them. I also think we should take to heart very seriously that parents of minorities and underrepresented groups in this community do not get a guarantee every day that their child won't be traumatized at school. So the idea that some of them may be traumatized during this event is relatively foreign to me. I also hope that none of us are judged on our worst social media posts. Some of the comments that I've read in this community in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we moved here in August of 2020. Some of the comments combined with some of the incidents that have happened in the schools have made me question why we ever moved here. And I think we all know that enrollment is declining. And if we want our enrollment to increase and our per pupil spending to go down, we want to attract people to the district, not scare them away. My hope is that if this planned series of events is modified at all because of some of these comments, questions that have been brought up, that at very least the staff training and the community event that evening are allowed to proceed.
1 minute.
Then the parents that really want to be there and want their kids to be there can hear the message that they need to be, that they need to hear. I also have another suggestion as far as a way to reach all of these parents and students. I believe that there should be a mandatory orientation at the beginning of the school year at Strong in the high school, if not the other schools as well, clarifying what is and is not tolerated, and that this orientation not be able to be opted out of, that it be mandatory. And I thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Next up is David Zamilski.
Thank you. I am a parent who's had 3 kids to go through this school system quite a few years ago. And I wish that they had the kind of opportunity that this district is availing right now. I'm a firm believer that kids know a lot about what's good for them. And I think that it's very true that all of them are curious and craving to know more about the history of people of color and through starting in 1619. I hear a lot of people talk about divisiveness and worrying about their kids getting traumatized. I don't personally. I mean, of course, I'm concerned about protecting my kids, but this is not an instant where that would ever happen because kids are curious. They're not going to be someone who's going to take personal responsibility or feel guilty or lose their self-esteem. The only hope, I believe, for this country getting out of this rut of racism is to educate the kids that are in our system, because by learning about the mistakes in the past, we're able, I hope, to be able to not repeat them in the future. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Next up is Maya Liss.
Hi, this is Daphne Liss. I go to Strong School and I'm part of the CARE group that stands for Cog-and-Chug Alliance for Racial Equity. So everyone in CARE thinks that Calvin should come to our schools. I just have something really quick to say, actually. If you don't teach people about like bad things that have happened in history, how are we going to change what will happen in the future? So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, the last four digits are 0860.
Hello, my name is Anthony Kearns, Durham resident. I've got two children. One already went through the RSD13 system. I have one in it right now. I want to say I'm on the fence about this speaker. A couple of reasons. One, I'd like to hear what he has to say first before making a judgment if I feel he's equipped or adequate to speak to my child. I'm not a big social media person, but just hearing comments that people said definitely makes me feel uncomfortable with having him speak with my child. Also, the other thing is how this whole thing was presented. To me, it was kind of in a short-term basis, and I didn't have a chance to really do any background investigation or research. So I just felt that it was kind of done underhanded in a way to get this guy hired and to speak to our students. So I'm not pleased with that. I do echo a lot of what the other parents had mentioned on this call, and I won't go into that. But I do believe that there needs, as far as diversity and equity, that needs to be done. But I think it also, a lot of that stuff happens with the house, this individual parents and the student at their homes, and grouping everybody together, in one community or a group. I don't think that's fair. Saying, I've heard some buzzwords that healing and truth, this speaker's going to say, and stuff like that. I'm not aware of any healing that needs to be done. I know there was some incidents at the school, but I don't know all the details. That hasn't been shared. I don't know if it has been shared. If it has, I'd like to hear that before basing my opinion on what needs to be done and bringing in a speaker. Anyway, I just wanted to voice my opinion. Right now, I'm not comfortable with having this speaker come and speak with my child, but I'm going to leave that decision up to them, my child also, if they want to attend or not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Eileen Buckheit.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak.
I just have a couple of short comments. I am in favor of the speaker. I do think this community has a lot to work to do as far as diversity and equity inclusion. I think that the recent failure of the committee in this town does a lot for wounds that are in this community that are not being addressed. And if those wounds aren't addressed, then we can't heal them. So I was impressed by the introduction for the meeting this evening. So my daughter will be attending. I also want to make a comment. I did hear Lindsay make a comment about students being singled out for not attending. I know personally of 2 incidences at school today, at the Strong School today, where kids were harassed, borderline bullied for attending. So that is going both ways, and it's very sad. I have spoken in previous board meetings about my disappointment of things that are happening in school that are reflecting our community. I think that those specific incidents today of kids being bullied for attending are a reflection of what's been going on in social media in the last couple of weeks. And I find it incredibly sad that the parents are pushing this down to their children, and it is coming out in the lunchroom. So once again, I am really disappointed with my daughter's experience in Region 13. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That's it for people who have spoken once. Lucy, I don't know if you'd like to allow people to speak again. We have a few people with their hands raised again.
How many, do you have a lot of people?
There are 3 currently who've already spoken, and it looks like they'd like to speak again.
You know, I think because we've had quite a few people speak, and we still need to continue with our discussion. I think at this time, unless they have not spoken, I think I'd rather not extend that at this time.
Okay. We do have one new person.
Unless I have board members that disagree.
We do
I
have
think he
another.
just said he has 1 new person too,
Yep.
so we could let that one.
1 new, right? Okay.
Janina Edinger.
What color? Hello, I am Ariana Edinger. I am from Middlefield, Connecticut, and I am in 8th grade. I am one of the CARE student ambassadors at Strong and the high school. That stands for Coggeshall Alliance for Racial Equity. And I have to make a point that has not been mentioned. So many parents believe that their kids have been being sheltered, and that a lot of incidents that have actually happened at school, a lot of parents, I believe, are not aware of, and they don't really know about. I personally have heard the N-word being said multiple times and other racial slurs being mentioned to people of color, and it's in a way being normalized, which is absolutely not okay. A couple of people mentioned how teachers should be taught what to do and like how to catch it. But a lot of times, I'd say probably 90% of the times, the teachers don't mention it. And if like they don't hear it, they don't mention it, they don't do anything about it. And if they do, it's very minimal of like any repercussions for the students that mention that. And so I think this is an issue, and this is something that the students really need to be made aware of. I just want to mention one more time, I'm in 8th grade. And so this is something that's been happening for multiple years, and it's being normalized. And people think that this is, other students around my age and younger are thinking this is okay. And this is not something that should be accepted or expected to be okay, and that something like this should change. And that's why I think Speaker Calvin Terrell will be an amazing eye-opening experience that will help so many people realize like the explanations. I understand, or I hope you guys understand that in CARE, we talk about standing up to the bullying and the racism that's happening, and how we're supposed to explain why if we hear something like a racial slur or something like that is mentioned, we need to explain why that's not okay. And that is something that I think the speaker will help everyone understand and recognize, so that they know and that they make changes in the future, so that everybody is accepted and feels like they are seen and known and understood in the community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We have Mariah Roy.
Hi, good evening. I just really wanted to take the time to commend all the learners who have been brave enough to speak out about what's going on in the schools. And I think every student or learner that I've heard from thus far is in support of Calvin Terrell coming to speak. And they're the ones that he's going to be addressing first and most directly in forms of healing what we're now learning is being normalized in school for them. My children are much younger. They're in the Brewster school right now, so they're not experiencing what these older children are now telling us is becoming normalized for them on a day-to-day. The learners are wanting to see action, and we have the opportunity to provide them somebody with an extensive amount of experience in this field. These learners are going to be faced with adversity and varying viewpoints as they continue to grow and age out of the school system. I have personally attended a talk with Dwight, who's on tonight. I went to one of his presentations and discussions about how to talk to kids about race and activism. So I really trust his judgment and opinion on Calvin Terrell coming to our district to speak. 6th to 12th grade is not what it used to be 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We're seeing such a dramatic increase in mental health trauma and struggles. And the things that we're hearing from learners that are going on a day-to-day just are so much more volatile than they used to be years ago. I don't think that just sympathizing with those that are struggling is doing any service to our community. It just drives a further disconnection. And our learners are reaching out to us for help. They want him to come and speak. They feel overwhelmed about what they're seeing in the schools. In the face of difficult conversations, it's not okay to just blanket things with a quick response. We really have to make an improvement and make a connection with these learners. So I just wanted to really thank all the learners who have spoken up, and I'm in support of the speaker, and I'm excited for him to come to the district and to learn from him.
Thank you.
We have Lucy Meggs.
Hi, Lucy, live in Durham. I'm really sad if the board doesn't approve the presentation by Calvin Terrell. I think we're really missing an opportunity. As the last speaker said, our learners really are ready for the kind of discussions I think he's gonna put together, and that, really truth telling and role playing are the way our youth learn. And I guess I've seen some of his programs online, and he seems like the sort of person we need for our district. And our district clearly needs somebody working with the kids. And I think he has the expertise that he'd do a good job. And I'm glad that the district planned it and that they, reached out to CERC and got help from people who knew who had spent time looking at different good opportunities. And I hope the board will decide to keep Calvin Terrell coming. That's all.
Thank you.
That's it for people who have not spoken yet. We just have the handful that have their hand raised again.
Okay, I think we're going to move forward as long as no one else pops up in the next minute or so, that hasn't spoken. I want to sincerely thank all of you who have come forward and have spoken and have sent emails. We definitely, the board, I know, definitely appreciates the input. We don't always have the opportunity to get out into the public to hear it. So we absolutely appreciate it. At this point, as I sat here and listened to all of this, a couple of things came out. It seemed like even there were quite a number of speakers, while they were concerned about this particular speaker, Calvin, they still felt that we needed to have some type of this issue brought before the board, before the students and the community, that the issue of racism and bullying needed to be brought. So, that said, there's obviously a need in the community to address this issue. I think where the concern comes in is some of the background of the speaker, and I believe the social media is probably the biggest issue. So a couple of things, I guess. One of the things that was brought out a number of times was having the availability of an outline available to the parents and possibly the community as well, of what Mr. Terrell will be speaking about. And I think that is at least the minimum that we would need to do if we went ahead and forward with this. The other piece is, are there any other ways that can address some of the concerns that people have brought up if we decide to go forward? And before I say that, it's not a board decision to go forward. The board at this time is going to offer their comments and their concerns and their recommendations, but it's an administrative decision. It is not a board decision. And I think the community needs to realize that. Even though we can weigh in on our thoughts, it's not ultimately not our decision. So is there any other way that some people who, and in many cases, are opting out to not have their children come, which is not what we want? Is there any other way that we can help to relieve their concerns and make them feel more comfortable? And I spent a lot of time, I spent a number of hours listening to quite a few of Calvin's YouTube presentations, and I read a lot of his biographies, his thinking, his background, his religious beliefs. And I felt comfortable with those until I hit the social media. And that's where, as I said before, that's where my concern comes in. And I think that's where a number of other people's concerns come in as well. Any ideas?
Lucy, could I
Yep.
jump in for a moment? Yeah, and again, I want to echo what you said about all the people joining us tonight, which is awesome. If nothing else, I feel like I've heard loud and clear from this community that we need to be on this issue as a community, and I think that's a victory. Because some of the people that emailed us didn't really think we needed to be doing anything in this space, and I think that's good. If it is helpful, and this was in your bank of questions, but I didn't know it was going to be possible. My understanding is that Calvin has been watching our meeting tonight, and that if we're interested, he can jump on and try to address some of these issues to you all directly as a board. Is that something you'd like to entertain, Lucy? That sounds fine with me. And how about the rest of you, of the board members? Is that a yes? Fine with that. I think that's a yes.
That sounds
good. Okay.
Yes.
Can we get him? Do you have his information to get him queued up? Oh, there he is.
Yeah, he's in the attendees. Yep.
Hello.
Calvin. Hi, Calvin.
Hello. Hello.
Welcome.
Hey, just heads up. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm sitting in my backyard. You might hear like a dog bark or some wind chimes. So just heads up.
All right, so Calvin, you've heard the discussion tonight, and Lucy, I don't know, do you want to ask questions directly to him from the board based on tonight, or do you just want to ask him to speak to some of these issues So this is organized in some way.
Perhaps a little bit of both, but you know, my biggest concern, and I mentioned this already, and a number of people have already, is the concerns that we have about some of the divisive social media posts you have. And it's not so much what you're saying, is that that's how you're feeling and thinking. How do you then come to a group of students and talk about unity and humanity, which I read very clearly in your, and heard very clearly in your YouTubes? How do you do that? Because on the one hand, you're speaking in one way, and the other hand, you're talking another. If you could just explain that, I would be very happy, and I'm sure a lot of other people would too.
Sure. Yeah. So for years, I've worked with getting neo-Nazis and gangbangers to leave that type of lifestyle. And there's a number of neo-Nazi and white nationalist organizations, as well as some other groups who, hold on 1 second. It's doing something here. Can you all still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, oh yeah. Oh wow, I'm on camera now. So they try to hack me and do different things. So I use my social media to provoke, literally, and to provoke dialogue, to get those guys to actually expose them, because what they don't want, a lot of these neo-Nazi groups, is young white guys and young white girls to start realizing that they're not superior to other people, that they are a part of a global reality. So white nationalism is a real issue in our United States, throughout the planet. I do this work not just in the US, in different parts of the world. And we have to heal this historical trauma. So social media is really, it's never been about real life. It's about provocation. And I use it to provoke these conversations. But the work that I do with youth and children and adults, it speaks for itself. And so I'm from Maui to Manhattan, I've done this. And I did have some concern, I'll be honest, with 6th to 12th grade, because that's such a developmental gap there. And I used to teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies. And so, you know, a 6th grader in the fall is very different than a 6th grader in the spring. So the kids, I think, are in middle school now, if you will. At the same time, yeah, that was my only concern. But I've done this throughout Connecticut, Groton, Mystic, throughout Hartford, West Hartford, Simsbury, Avon, you name it. I've been all over the state for years, and everything's been amazing. You know, a lot of powerful response, and a lot of kids ready to step up, a lot of times that adults aren't ready to do, as I heard a lot of youth. And I want to thank those adults that are also concerned, because whether you like me or not, what I hear from a lot of people is the concern of the well-being of their children. And that's valid. That's very valid. All right. I don't want to discount that at all, as a father of 4 myself. At the same time, I especially want to say, I think people have a very low expectation of white children. They do not think white children can develop the mental, emotional, and maybe even spiritual fortitude that non-white children have been forced to develop in this society. And so putting white kids in a bubble is not going to do anything. It's not going to help them to be globally literate. So my social media is about provoking thought and conversations and revealing Nazis. My work in person is about helping everybody remember that we all cry and smile in the same language, and our blood's all red.
I like the blood all red, and I like the fact that you talk about that we're all one human race, because that's exactly how I feel. I think a part of my concerns come in with a lot of the equity type trainings is they put white people up here as the oppressors and the Blacks, people of color, as being oppressed. When you do that, it's very difficult to bring people in the middle, because the people at the bottom always feel that it's not even worth it if I'm going to be oppressed, it's not even worth it. And this is my own personal feelings, and I probably shouldn't bring them up now, but, I taught sixth grade for a number of years. I taught special education. I know what you mean by sixth graders in September versus sixth graders by the end of the school year. They're like a whole different breed. But I'm going to stop talking and see if anyone else has any other questions.
Well, Lucy, could I say something to your issue with?
Absolutely.
One of the things about that piece of equity is, so there's a lot of superficial understanding about how race impacts all identity issues, gender, class, sexuality. Europeans renamed themselves a white race. Before that, they were British and German and Dutch and French and Irish. And then before that, they were indigenous people, Visigoths, Pikes, Druids, you name it, right? And so we really have to get to, why did Europeans rename themselves a white race and then call indigenous people here non-white, and then kidnap people from lands called Africa a black race? Why did Europeans make that up? And so this isn't about shame or blame. It's naming the truth so that we could heal. And so I think a lot of times the equity work has been done very superficially, but we have to name the issue and then get to a point where we're emotionally mature enough to discuss these issues, to say words like white people, Black people, Latinx, Northeast Asian, Southeast Asian, indigenous, native, biracial, multiracial, you name it, without it emotionally hijacking us. We develop sort of an emotional social fortitude. And the kids, I think, are really ready throughout the country, throughout the world. I've seen the kids ready. The fragility is on the part of the adults.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Hey, Calvin, it's Lindsay. I'm just gonna, we've received so many questions this week that I know that some of these aren't necessarily, my questions. There's a big concern about a speech that's online that you had in Massachusetts, and I think I hear a lot of parents very reluctant to wanting their kids to go based on what was stated that day, whether that's, it's the truth or not. There was no recording of it that I could find for people that had asked me that question. But something that I found concerned them was that they weren't going to be able to speak to you first. And if they couldn't speak to you first in a community forum, they were concerned. They were going to take the word of parents who went through this, whether it was truth or not, over trusting that they were doing the right thing and sending their child. So have you ever thought about having that community forum ahead of time, or have you ever come across that?
Yeah, I've actually did a few times, but it was like the most recent one was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it was prior to COVID. I can speak specifically that Amherst is like one negative in thousands, literally. I've been doing this work formally since 1994. Thousands of presentations I've done throughout the world. What happened there actually was there was a superintendent. She didn't have alphabets after her name. She was kind of like a working class Irish lady, and there were people, Amherst, this was in the heart of, the 5 colleges, UMass, Amherst, Holyoke, Smith, that kind of thing, right? And there were people that wanted her gone. And they didn't follow my protocol. I was like, you do need to have an opt-out. You need to offer some things to parents and whatnot. And so the whole situation, I became the fall guy. Like, it went amazing. And I was working with students from Amherst College. Actually, Tommy Raskin, one of the Senator Raskin's son, was a part of that presentation. Tommy, he just reached out to me in the fall of 2020, and of 2019, and he took his life because he was just frustrated. And but anyway, they had did some skits and presentations to the kids, and they were taking questions in character. Now, some of the way they responded in character, I couldn't control it. It was on the moment, it was on the fly, but it was kind of harsh. And what happened was there were some kids that were just like shocked at what they said. But the presentation went really well. But what happened in the community was there was this movement to kind of try to remove the superintendent. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And I had a conversation, if they do their research, I did a conversation with a reporter there about not following protocol. And that's why, just if anybody's listening, it was my suggestion to the district that they have an opt-out. And I was planning to let the kids know if someone does opt out, don't harass them. All right. Don't hurt them or whatever. You don't know what's going on in their family, that kind of thing. But to give an option, my eldest son's on the spectrum. And so I know how things go. The visualizations and things like that, I only do that kind of stuff in my camp when I do my retreats. So I'm just speaking specifically to Amherst. But with regards to your question, Lindsay, about the work with the kids, I talk about how violence can go from laughter to tears, how kids weaponize social media, and how it's prejudice is much bigger than race. Prejudice is about gender and class. It's about religion and body size, the way a kid plays a sport, right? And how we either deify or demonize. And what's fascinating is that at the end of my presentations, and I could say this with 100% like confidence, kids are apologizing to each other. They're like making up. Kids are saying stuff they did in the third grade. They're working it out. What tends to happen though, is a lot of times they go back to classrooms where adults that are not doing this kind of personal evolutionary work aren't ready to have the conversation. That's why I'm glad CERC is there, because I've worked with CERC for years, and I know they're doing ongoing work with the district to not wait for a crisis, but to address this stuff proactively.
Calvin, I just have a question. In the beginning of that story, you had mentioned that, I think, and I may have I don't know if I heard this right. The superintendent was a working class Irish woman.
Well, she came from an Irish background, working class. And so I've worked in hyper conservative and hyper liberal spaces, right? And Amherst was a really hyper liberal space. And one of the things that can happen is people can have this kind of elitist attitude about, you're a superintendent, but you're not doctor or such and such, right? And there was a lot of comments made on social media and different things, just kind of like, is she really smart enough? Did she go to one of the colleges? There was a lot of just meanness, right? And in the conservative communities that I work with, like Wyoming, North Dakota, Kansas, Arizona, hey, I'm here, right? And I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, Libertarian or anarchist. I always tell the kids I'm a soul. But I think that there was a lot of class prejudice that was really like hiding. People were hiding behind their class prejudice in this attack of this superintendent.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, because I'm a working class Irish woman. And to have the story introduced that way, almost as if it was a negative, is, again, it's just,
no.
I find you a wonderful speaker. I've listened to a lot of your stuff. I would love to hear from you. I definitely, I've had friends who've come and talked to you. I want to hear more from you because I think that you are a wealth of knowledge. I just really, 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 and I'll just tell you this person, like, because we're face to face, I really, really wish the social media was not a part of what you do, because I feel that you lose a lot of people, a lot of white people. I understand 100% the neo-Nazi groups. I mean, no, I find it hard to believe there's even people who even support that or join groups such as that. But you have to understand that when you call it whiteness, you group a whole category of people with that who don't have that same belief and do take offense to it. With that said, I just, and I'm sure you understand that, I just feel that by doing so, a divisiveness does happen that I wish didn't with you, because I feel that you have so much to share and you do have the ability to unite so many people, that I feel that having that aspect does still cause a divide.
Well, Lindsay, I'll say there's a book you really need to read called How the Irish Became White. No joke. And there's another book called How Jews Became White Folks. And there's a third book called Are Italians White? Because these three groups prior to World War I weren't considered white. They became white in law. And so this idea of whiteness is a construct, is made up. So I personally, Lindsay, I don't want to, I want to be united with all of humankind, but I don't want it to be, everything has been on white terms. Our whole society, we're speaking the language of the English on indigenous land. Let's name that, right? So unless we're going to get honest about that, there are forces that want to repeat history. And so I want white people to get as strong as Black people have been forced to get. I want white people to not be emotionally hijacked by the word whiteness. And there are white people in my family that understand that, and we talk about that. In my family, we're Native, Black, Indigenous, white. We're Jewish, atheist, agnostic, Baha'i, various Christian denominations, kind of a Muslim Wiccan thing going on. So I just would say to you, and I want to say on here because I want people to hear where I'm really coming from, I will constantly use the word whiteness because it was made up. And there is no yellow, red, black, or white people. There are just shades of brown, but whiteness is real. And so my mother's maiden name is Abernathy. Ralph Abernathy, who was Dr. Martin Luther King's best friend, is my cousin. This work is my blood. And so unless people have studied this on a regular basis for going on 3 decades, like I have, throughout the planet in multiple ways, a lot of times the understanding is superficial at best. And so I would like to say to you, study how the concept of whiteness was created by Europeans and how it is not divisive. It was designed to divide, and it is still working. The beauty of this call is that I think there are parents that don't want me there and do want me there and are on the fence that are going to be having conversations about this in their homes. And that's amazing. That's the beauty of the democracy we got to protect.
Calvin, thanks for coming to our environment here. We seemingly the students.
Hey, Jamie, sorry, what's that? Calvin, I just wanted to let you know that was Maura that asked that last question. It wasn't Lindsay. So I don't think Calvin can see us, or if he can, but just let him know who's asking the question.
Sorry, Calvin, it was Maura.
Bad. Hey, Laura. Okay, read How the Irish Became White. It's really good. It's really good.
Maura. It's an Irish name, Maura.
Maura. Oh, is it Gaelic? That's so.
That's right.
Study. Go ahead.
Calvin, I don't know how much time you have. One thing I'm hearing from the student perspective is there's seemingly an apprehension about their ability to deal with the diverse world that they're going into. I personally think they're pretty well prepared. I survived okay, but I would love to see, and I don't want to be your speechwriter, but some real gravitas, some real historical things. Are you familiar with Mr. Du Bois, William Edward Burghardt Du Bois? My family's had a long association with their family in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. He grew up, yes, as somebody who was like the only person who didn't look like them in the entire community. And I do like that message. I do think the kids need to hear that, but in a really positive, constructive way, not just the bad stuff that happened. I understand bad stuff happens, but it's like the uplift would be, what did somebody like Mr. Du Bois do to get out of that situation? That I think is really uplifting, and that's something that's positive that I think the kids could really respond with. And you know, again, the apprehension with the parents is, I don't want my child coming out of here feeling demeaned and demoralized and like they're not worth it. And that is a fear that is certainly concerning. But, you know, just something really uplifting for these kids to say, okay, we can deal with this scary world that seemingly is out there. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. My message is truth and about like what's happened historically, but also the possibility of humankind. One of the pieces I share with the kids is how our physical bodies are literally made of stardust, like Carl Sagan talked about, that our physicality, the same trace elements that exist in stars, is the same trace elements that exist in the human body, and that we're literally made of light, and that we don't have to blow out each other's candles to make others burn brighter. And that is what's happened historically and is continually happening right now. It's not like this is the past. This is very much our present. And so with that also, if we do the racial thing that was started during colonization, 82% of the earth is non-white, while 18% of the earth is considered white. So we do no service to white children by not preparing them to become globally literate in a world that is shrinking, that they're going to have to learn to navigate. And also, it seems like there's no thought, well-being, concern, consideration, compassion about non-white children of any background and what they go through. This is historical white supremacy. It's to just be hyper concerned about the well-being of white people and just totally disregard what non-white people are going through and have gone through. I hope your district is not that kind of a district.
Any other thoughts? Because before we let you go, I would like you to speak to the community. We have approximately 72 people out there, minus those of us who are here, there are about 15 of us. What can you say to the community to show them that, or to convince them that you're the right person to speak to their children?
You know what? I don't have that kind of power. The only thing I would say is that I love you.
From your heart.
Yeah, I love you. I'm a warrior, and I will die for you, and I will die for your babies. And I am here to call all colors to be better than history. I would hope if you are a white man, that you will talk to white men about how white men can be better than white history. If you are a Black woman, if you are a Boricua, to talk to Black women and Boricuas about how Black women and Boricuas can be better than this history. But I don't have a magic wand, and I've worked with children all over the world, and they have been ready. And some of them are now teachers and superintendents and cops and working as activists and doing things all over the planet. So I love you, and I've helped your babies like yours do amazing things, but the choice is yours, and that's the beauty. You still have a choice. I'm gonna go feed my dogs.
I think I have one real quick, if that's okay. In the contract, it says we're gonna that the conversation, it's more off the cuff, is what I've gathered, and it focuses on respect. Do you know how much of that?
Yeah, so I break down right at the beginning the etymology of the word respect. So in the language of the English, the word respect, re is a prefix meaning afresh and new, and spect is a Latin root word meaning to look again, to look rather. So respect literally means to look again. And what I do is to invite the scholars to look again at their life, to look again at how they've been part of the solution, part of the problem, to look again at their first thoughts about people, their first looks at people and ideas and concepts, and how a lot of times we've been trained to look through a lens of prejudice where we either deify or demonize. And so when we learn to think about our thinking, this metacognitive strategies to look at the way we look at the world, we invite the best of our humanity. And so that is the thread that runs throughout the presentation.
Okay. Some of those words, I think of my own 2 6th graders, and I sit and I go metacognitively, like those things they won't get. How do you reach the younger kids in that audience?
Trust me, kids in South Africa, the word for hen is ikukukas. And a 2-year-old can say ikukukas. And the kids, I acquaint them with stuff. I have them pull out their phones and look stuff up, right? And so my presentation isn't like a presentation. Sorry, my dogs. I have 3, and they're mortal enemies. I have a husky coyote mix, a corgi, and an Australian shepherd. So anyway, the kids are ready. They respond. They go home. They're looking up stuff. They're using their phones. But also I'm doing this for the educators to see what 21st century pedagogical strategies look like to hold this many kids for hours at a time. And so the kids respond all over. I mean, there's a school in Stamford, Connecticut. I've done some work. It was a private school there. These kids will commute into Manhattan, their parents to Manhattan, from that kind of school to juvenile detention centers in Los Angeles. And they respond, they're ready.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, one of the issues that came up was that some parents felt that they didn't know what you were going to talk about. There was no syllabus or outline. So we were asking if possibly, and I believe we spoke to Michelle about that as well, just some type of a flyer to outline what you will be saying before, or the basics of your talk, what you'll be saying before you would be presenting to the students. I fully intend to be there when you're speaking to the students and also to the faculty as well as the community. So I know myself, and I think there'll be some other board members who will be spending the day with you. So if this happens, so.
I'm more than willing to provide like a basic like outline or breakdown of key points, maybe some learnings. I also hope that you all vet and ask that of every speaker or presenter that touches your grounds of
Absolutely.
any. Yeah. And so that's not a problem at all. And I'm actually excited to do this because in these times where there's a reckoning that has to happen. I mean, the word Connecticut is an Algonquin word, meaning Tidewater River. It's an indigenous word. We still haven't even reckoned with the attempted genocide of Native people in these lands. So here's an opportunity to really heal. And I'll send that outline. I hope some of those folks, maybe if you're on the call, that were possibly thinking about opting out, maybe you're thinking, hopefully you'll send your babies. But if not, have a conversation with those that went about what they liked and didn't like.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate you taking your time to speak to us. And we hope you have a great evening. I notice your dog's quieted down.
Yeah, there's a hummingbird, so they're just like hunting. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments before we let Mr. Terrell go? Thank you very much. Very appreciative of your time.
All right. You all take care.
Thank you. You too. Okay, as I said before, it's not the board's decision as to whether or not Mr. Terrell speaks to us, speaks to our students, our community on May 3rd. I think the board, we tried to do our own form of vetting and to allow the community an opportunity to get a much broader, more factual picture of the process as well as the man. And it was great that he came on live. I don't know if anyone has any other comments. As I said, I certainly intend to attend the student assembly as well as the faculty assembly, not to be intrusive, but just to be a listener, and also the community forum in the evening if this is held. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Yeah, we'll see this, Bob. My sense is that, working with the students have come forth with the well-being committee, they are very ready to handle this conversation. I've had speakers in other settings where I've worked that you have to raise some issues for you to talk about this. Otherwise, it's just passed over. And so I think that his comments and his ideas about the history and about all those things are important for the kids to understand in order to get their own sense of where we're going. We've had a goal of make our students as global citizens. They need to have the opportunity to think about these issues, to talk about them, to discuss them, and to debate how to handle issues like we've had in the school on their own. The kids have stepped up. They've joined the well-being committee. They've come. They bring their own concerns and voices, and I think they are ready to handle this. And I think Calvin understands clearly the concerns of the community, and I think we'll be respectful of that.
Yes, the students we've had come forward have been a smaller representation of the entire community. And Mr. Terrell is one person, one opinion. And for our students to be global students, I look at this as just a beginning because issues need to be looked at from various perspectives, not just one perspective, because what that does then is it gives our students the opportunity to weigh the differences, to give justice to the thoughts of inclusion and diversity, because there's a lot of different opinions out there, a lot of diversity in opinions, and for them to come to the conclusions based on, quite a bit of background. So, as I said, I would look at Mr. Terrell as perhaps a starting point, and then moving forward. I still do maintain some reservations, but we'll see what happens. But as I said, if this is a starting point, we will be having other opinions, other comments, other speakers, other programs for our students. It's just the beginning. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I think I can definitely echo a good portion of what Lucy just said. I think our frustration comes with is that, we're 10 people on this board, and knowing the community and knowing so many of the kids and being involved. Some of us have been here our whole lives, some haven't, in that we could have really helped a lot in choosing someone and vetting someone and possibly helping to make sure that this divisiveness didn't happen. It's heartbreaking. Social media is heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for me to see his social media. And I honestly didn't take it from a provoking stance. That's something I'd have to really look at again, maybe from another angle. But I find it really hard to get past the social media, and I do think that, and I was appreciative that he had answered those questions. A few things that I had thought of, and a few things people had said, and I don't know if Doug or anyone can speak to this, or actually Ken's on the phone. Is it possible for kids who are kept home that day, is it possible for families to Zoom in together so that they can have that experience but still be with their parents? I don't know if we want to answer that before I go on to the other stuff I have to say, or if we could look into it.
I wish you guys would have asked him, or we had.
Yeah, I just thought it. Yeah,
I think we've reached out to him. Corey, did you get an answer on that yet?
I actually have an answer on that, Doug, if you don't mind. I did speak with Calvin about that last evening, and he would prefer that it not be recorded. As you can imagine, all of what you are so fearful of in regards to the social media, a little snippet can be taken out of context and go viral, in 3 seconds, and not even. And so that is a protection of his work and the integrity of his work, and certainly of the work and the branding of your particular district. I'm just so impressed. Board Chair Lucy, thank you for even convening and having the courage to have this meeting this evening. I'm, thanking Calvin for showing up, even though, there were, maybe some arrows, just really impressive. And so I'm so, appreciative that you have invited CERC to be a partner in this work. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think, and I understand where Michelle's coming from. I have a hard time with it. I feel like if you're really proud of your work in its entirety, you'd be okay with it having be recorded. But I understand experiences.
Yeah, let me say this too to that, and I don't want to speak for Calvin, obviously. My experience with a lot of keynote type speakers that do this type of work is they don't allow themselves to be recorded, because it's almost like a copyright infringement piece, where then somebody else can take their work and post it on YouTube and market it in the same way, like you're not supposed to, you attend a Broadway musical or something like that. So I don't find that to be that unusual. I don't disagree with you that for families who feel that way, I think my answer to that would be then come to the evening presentation with the community, as some families said they might do, and then you and your kids can experience it together. It won't be the exact same thing, obviously, but at least it will give you that kind of comfort, I would think, to reassure if you're uncomfortable having them watch it without you. I think the other piece to that is a really important piece. And he got into it. His work with youth, and Michelle described this, is addressing them as a group, kind of in a school setting. Having children watch these things alongside their parents is a very different, also very important, but it's just a different way to encounter this. And if I'm not mistaken, Michelle, and thankfully, unfortunately, he's left us now, but I think you mentioned a lot of it. They have little sidebar conversations with their peers. Is that correct? So I think that's correct. So that's a hard thing to replicate in a Zoom. I mean, you guys have been through my reimaginings. I don't let cameras come in there and do any of that, because it's just, the experience is kind of the immersive in-person experience. And I think that's what he kind of creates.
Yeah, so you heard him mention, there could have been an interaction in 3rd grade, right? Now those youth now find each other, right? And so some of that is very private and in that space and in that moment. So yes, so proprietorship, yes, future misuse of what we're all, gotten riled up about, some of us. And then I think the latter piece is protecting the experience of the youth. So multiple reasons, but I do appreciate Doug extending that invitation for parents and youth to participate in the community event in the evening.
And maybe that's something we can ask to Doug if, I think it was that the parents would be letting the principal know that they wouldn't be coming that day, or maybe the teachers, but maybe a response to that. I don't know if Deb or Cheryl could send a response that said, we understand that if, and remind them about the community event, and if they want to join at that time, because I'm not sure it'll be on their mind. So just on their mind to opt out at that point.
Yes, we can do that.
Had a few other hands up. I think, Maura, are you still there? Because I think you had your hand up first. Is Maura still on? Yes. Maura, did you want to speak?
Yeah, sorry guys, I was trying to find my mute button. I was just going to reiterate what you said also, Lucy, that I feel that this is just the beginning. My fear is that the speaker comes, we have great conversations, the story starts, and then it gets kind of dropped. He leaves, he goes back to Phoenix, and then it's over. So again, I think the emphasis is it's just the beginning, I hope that there's many other speakers who have different perspectives. I feel like this is just only one aspect of the issues at our school. I'd like for us not to forget that there's a huge bullying that happens, not just for race, but also just not understanding or appreciating people's differences in general. So I would love to see, and I know that a few suggestions were given for even resources, programs where the focus becomes just more of accepting each other's differences as a focus. Yep.
More, can I just answer and respond to that?
Okay,
so,
can I just finish my other point too? And then yes, I definitely want to hear that. But the other thing that I was going to mention too is that I really still stress that as opposed to not having the speaker, I would much rather see that this somehow become a community speaking event where I've heard bits and pieces of when his availability is that day, but that it become almost like a community event where he's not just necessarily speaking at just the schools, but then maybe it is just the kids. I know I heard that it's a different experience for the kids, but I'd rather see that than not speaking at all. Okay, go ahead, Corey. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry I cut you off. First of all, I would like to thank Michelle and Dwight for being here. We have worked with CERC for many years now, and we've worked with Dwight. We actually had a partnership with Middletown Schools. And so Dwight was part of that when he worked in Middletown. In response to your question, a one and done, Maura, what we're trying to do is very planful, right? So we're going to have the speaker out, but CERC is working with the students and is going to be working with staff. The plan is to really get the staff more comfortable so that they can have these conversations, and that the work can continue. We don't want a one and done experience. We want it to be embedded. So, you know, I think we all want the same thing. And I think Doug mentioned it earlier too. We want our children to feel safe, accepted, and respected. And, you know, how we get there, it's a journey. But I think, you know, it's obvious that our youth and have been asking for things and speakers, and the incidents that have happened within the last 60 days were incidents that bubbled to the surface. There's a lot of underlying things that have happened over the years that perhaps were not addressed. And we're addressing things now. So I thank the board too for your passion and for having this meeting, because I know you find this important as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca, did you want to say something?
I didn't know Rebecca got on. Hi, Becca.
Yeah, I was on the phone for a while, so now I'm here. So a couple of things. I mean, I guess, so if it's just the beginning, it's just the beginning, and we can hear from a lot of people. I really do wish that, Doug, you had vetted this differently right from the beginning, because this is something that, I mean, Circ is a great place to go. They are great. We have great resources from them. But if you had Googled this guy for a second, we could have known what we at least were up against, or what we might be facing when folks raised this. I think we have to do it. This conversation has to happen. We have to have a series of conversations and workshops. Several of the districts, including my current district, were working on how we're going to get at all of these things. I mean, the implicit bias, people don't think it's real. You know, things like that, like how do I work with my staff? How do I work with my parents? It's work that has to be done throughout. I just think that my fear with Calvin coming is not about his message or about what he has to say. He can do the best job in the world. And at the end of the day, it's going to be about the controversy. So what we want here is for the kids, and I'm not going to stand in the way of him delivering to the kids if it's going to be helpful to them. But I think that the message in the community around this, there's so much divisiveness around it that it just would be so much better to start the conversation with someone that it didn't start that way. I also have to mention, I don't know, Doug, if you got the letter from David Lowry about Omar Thornton. I don't know if you know who he is, but he was the gentleman who gunned down a number of people at Hartford Distributors when Dave worked there. And he cited Calvin Tyrell as, you can't blame Calvin, but he did cite him as this, that, and the other thing. So there's some community thought and some community angst and some community connection to him. And again, it's not Calvin Tyrell's fault that this person cited him on these things, but it is just background that you ought to be aware of, because we want to at least be sensitive to people to say, you know what, we hear you, but that's not what this is about. We you know, you've got to respond to those things. You've got to, when someone says to you, this is the person who creates the Omar Thorntons of the world, you got to call them and you got to say, hey, you know, let's have a conversation about that, because, and I already did that. I already talked to Dave and I said, look, I understand where you're coming from, but let's get real about, let's take a breath and let's be in this moment. Let's be in this moment. But that's real for him. And, you know, like that's what all of these things bring up. They bring up real things for everyone. So the fact that the conversations I agree with Calvin, conversations are going on right now that probably weren't going on and need to be going on. My main concern is that we get something really great out of this for the kids in the community, and that it not end up being all about this conflict.
Thank you, Rebecca. We also had John and then Amanda, who had their hands up before.
Yeah, Lucy, thank you. I'm just going to echo some of the things everyone else has already said. You know, the social media portion of it, like I said before, is still a difficult thing for me to kind of get by. He used the word or the term to provoke conversation. I don't know if I totally agree with that. Do I think he's an eloquent speaker? Do I think he's going to have some positive influence? Maybe, sure, absolutely. But I still have my reservations about it. One of the other things is that came up a couple of times is the vetting of possible speakers. I think that probably should have been done. I think we should have had an opportunity to vet them and take into consideration maybe others that maybe weren't so as controversial as Calvin is. In addition, I think I'm more saddened to keep continuing hearing our students and our learners saying that this is a rampant thing that's been going on for years and that we haven't done anything about it. And to be quite honest with you, if that is the case, then that is sad. But being around, having 3 kids and being around a numerous amount of teachers and principals and Miss Stone and how great all these teachers and administrators are, I can't see anyone letting this kind of behavior go on. So it comes back down to a couple of people saying, and specifically Antonio, comes down to parents, comes down to respect, comes down to a couple of different things. So I really wish we would have just vetted this out a little bit more. And even in my profession, there's certain things that Mr. Terrell has said too that is extremely controversial towards law enforcement as well too, that I'm not too happy about either. So, but that's on a personal note. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I don't know if anybody saw my email from earlier. I sent links about the Connecticut Safe School Coalition that provides information on anti-bias, anti-bullying programs that I think would be, money well spent to continue this. Because obviously a lot of people want this to be dealt with. We want to address these issues. I don't think anyone who spoke today against having Calvin come to the district disagree that there is an issue, because there clearly is. Bullying is a very big issue, and it's starting even at elementary school. So it's something that we need to really, start focusing on. I do just have a few questions that some of the public comments from earlier. It was referred that he, or referenced rather, that he has an educational background. Was he a certified teacher? Do we know this? I'm just curious. And there was a question about his business being dissolved. I don't know what that's about, but I would like to get clarification on that. And that's really it. I hope that moving forward, we can, come together as a community and school community and really work on these bullying problems.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any answers to her questions?
I can certainly get you the Vita, but yeah, Calvin has a few degrees. I think you also heard him speak that he was an educator at the middle school level.
Any other thoughts? Okay, I'm going to echo a little bit of what everyone has said. And I'm going to also say that we don't have to agree with all that Calvin has said or will say. But I look at this as a start of dialogue, and a start of what the district will be offering in the future, not as the only point, not as the only opinion. I also ask that in the future, as whether it's the board's prerogative to make these decisions, the board needs to be an integral part of the vetting and the knowledge process, mainly because this is a very huge issue, and whether or not we should be part of it, we are part of it, and we need to know, be told, be given information ahead of time before decisions are made, especially with regard to these particular issues, programming, speakers, whatever the administrators are looking into or deciding. We have some alternatives. Amanda's brought up some stuff. I believe there was another email that was sent out at about 6 o'clock, which I looked at when she was speaking about a programming that it's available. But I think it's really critical that the board be kept informed, updated, and have an opportunity to speak their thoughts and their concerns as the district moves forward, because we all have the same interests. We all want what's best for the kids. And we all know that the issue of bullying, all types of bullying, including racial bullying, is prevalent. It's not prevalent only in our school district. It's prevalent all over. And it's something that needs to be addressed. It's not acceptable. And there was one other thing I wanted to say that's kind of slipped my mind. Oh, I think the other thing is, and I have mentioned this in an email that I returned back to the students, the CARE students, and I sent you all a copy, is it really upsets me that there's so much focus on negative when there are so many positive things that are happening in this district. And for some reason, we've lost sight of all the positive things. A number of speakers tonight brought those up. And I think we need to start shifting the focus on the positive as well as those things that need to be improved. Excuse me. Are there any other thoughts or conversations?
Sure,
I think it just, oh, sorry, Jamie. You want to go ahead, Jamie.
Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. We have the Wellbeing Committee, and that probably would have been a great place to start that discussion about whom we were going to have for a speaker. If I were aware of it, I certainly would have said we need to bring this to the whole board. Perhaps it's a really good argument. Doug seemingly wants to move in the direction of having our, what are we calling it, Doug, work session prior to a board meeting where everybody could be present, whether it needs to be a full hour or half hour, but that is a wonderful opportunity to get all of us together when there is something that quite as controversial or important as this that's going to happen. We can all at least be aware of it and at least have a short discussion on it.
Thank you, Jamie. Lindsay?
Yeah, and I think, from the beginning, we had talked about that line of respect that was coming in through in his contract and how he's going to speak. And I hope we don't lose sight of the systemic bullying in general that's going on in our district. We hear it constantly. We hear kids coming home crying because of their weight that people have picked on them. We hear people coming home crying because people make fun of them because they don't have certain things that other families do. We do live, as many have said today, in a very diverse community of thought and division of wealth. We have to understand that bullying, while racism is a huge part of that, I don't want to lose sight of the victims of bullying in our district who are suffering. And I hope that it's not something that we would wait until the fall to really address, because a lot of these kids are suffering and they've been suffering all year long. And sometimes they don't feel heard. Sometimes kids can't be punished for different reasons. But I don't want to see any of the kids leave for the summer and feel like the bullying that happened to them is any less than the bullying that is discussed in that assembly. So I wish I could have said that to Calvin beforehand, but maybe that's something that if Michelle talks to him, she could let him know for me, because
yeah.
I worry about all these learners. I do. I don't want them cast aside.
So the student focus group summaries that I mentioned earlier have been shared with Calvin, and certainly those had a very specific racial equity focus, but the intersectionalities that you just described, Lindsay, were loud and clear. So he is, you know, as everyone has mentioned, he's aware of your concerns, but he's also hyper-focused on what the student experience is, and he's going to be addressing directly.
Thank you, Lindsay. I just wanted to say that that's what I was mentioning before too. I think it's just super important for us to not lose focus on the many kids that are bullied for various reasons.
I agree. I'd also like to make a suggestion, if I may, for those students who perhaps might not be participating in the presentation, rather than having just a study hall, since the focus of the conversation has to do with respecting each other and acceptance of each other and being kind to each other. Could there be some types of team building activities that could be conducted with these students during the time that this presentation is going on, so that we're basically conveying to those students the importance of respecting each other and appreciating each other and understanding each other, so they're kind of getting a similar message? I just throw that out. You don't have to answer it right now, but I just think that would be more productive than just having time to do work. But those are my thoughts.
I agree too with that. I was thinking about that after it was mentioned, and I think that you know, in trying to prevent any kids from feeling that they're being punished, that is definitely a great idea. I think that it's important to remember that the many kids who will be opting out of this is due to most likely the family or a parent decision. So to make the kids all sit as if they are being punished, I do agree that there has to be other proactive things that will be going on.
Right. And perhaps if those students who are opting out for whatever reason know that there are going to be these team building types activities, that they will be more inclined to come into school and participate, or their parents might be more inclined to have them come to school. Just throwing out some thoughts here. Okay, as I said before,
Lucy, I am a little concerned too, and I don't know if Doug or Deb or Cheryl can talk about this, but just because of how political this seems to be on our own social medias and our communities, have we talked about possibly having our SRO plus another trooper that day, just because it is the day of our referendum, on top of the speaker, and if there is backlash, I think the parents would feel, I know a lot of parents would feel a lot better knowing that we had more coverage than we normally do. So something to think about.
and I'd also like to put out one more thing before we close, because we've been here for a number of hours, is that the community, the parents, the social media that goes on, the comments of the adults, we are the examples to our children. We set the tone because they learn from us from the get-go. And that's a very important piece that parents and community members need to realize. If we're expecting our students to be respectful, we're expecting the school to teach them to be respectful and accept diversity and inclusion, and which also includes diversity of thought and opinion, as well as racism and other issues, that we ourselves as adults need to be the prime examples of accepting other opinions and respecting each other. So I think that's an important piece that needs to be put out there. So that said, again, the board does not make the decision to continue or to cancel the speaker. I think we've gotten quite a bit of input from the community as well as from the board members. So ultimately the decision rests with the administration, and I appreciate all the time that you have put in. I appreciate all the input that we have received from the community in whatever form we have gotten it. And knowing again that this is just a starting point, but it's a starting point that needs to be had at some point. Okay, I think we can, I don't know, Doug, if you wanted to say anything, otherwise we'll probably just.
I do, even though I know I'm just as tired as the rest of you. I do want to thank everyone. I know this was a long night. Again, thank you for accommodating myself and maybe a few others who've had some COVID related issues, so we could be part of this. Michelle, Dwight, staff, board, everybody. I've heard loud and clear that you all feel like you should have had more information about this sooner. I take that criticism for what it is, and I will try to do better in that space moving forward. I've also heard that some of you might want to actually be involved in the vetting process of things like this. That's something I'll have to give some more thought, because that's not something that really in the past I don't know, that to me that's staff work and that's the work of CERC and all those pieces, but I think what I've heard more is communication on it. I could have done a much better job with that, and I do apologize to you all and to the community for that. I think we could have done a better job with that. I haven't heard anything tonight that has made me change directions on this. This is the path we've set forward. This is what we've communicated. But I want to say something too that I think is important. I appreciate the roles we play and the divisions that we have, but we're a team here. The way I view it, we're a team, the staff, the board, and all of us. And, you know, if the board doesn't want us to move forward with this, we won't move forward. But I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that consensus. What I've heard is a lot of concerns. And what I've heard from a community is some concerns and like division. If you were kind of tallying, even the people that called in tonight, it was like almost 50-50. And it started with people that were against, and then people came in. But here's the piece that tips me over the scale. And, you know, no matter how long I work here, you guys need to know this about me and the community too. The learner voice to me is extremely important, and not just the learners we heard from tonight or the learners that have emailed you, but the ones that I've heard from since I have been here. They're asking for this to be done. So I totally take any criticism about maybe this wasn't the perfect person or the perfect time or the perfect communication. That is 100% on Doug. But I applaud all of us that were willing to do this work, because it is such important work. And I thank you all for giving me that responsibility and trusting me with it. And we don't know how things are going to turn out next week. Half the people could opt their kids out. We don't know. We don't really know. I do hope that people will reconsider based on what Calvin said tonight. And if you all could help us spread the word for anybody that wasn't watching, and I know it's like a long 3 hours or whatever, I think if they're on the fence, if they would at least watch the recorded part of tonight's meeting where Calvin was part of this, I think hearing from him directly was very important. It was important for our staff when we first had our conversation with him. And it was important for me tonight. And I sense that it was for a lot of you as well. So so thank you, Lucy, and thank you, board members and staff for you know, going through this today. I think this is very important. I think it sets the stage nicely for next week.
And I'd also like to personally thank Michelle and Dwight for taking your time and sharing and being so patient. And okay, I think we're at the point.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, yes, by Lindsay, seconded.
Second.
All right, who is that?
Rebecca. Jamie,
Rebecca, sorry.
what class is that? Mrs. Dyson? Who is that behind you?
You are correct. 1983 Gourmet Club. I
Gourmet
pretended
Club. Right.
I pretended to know what I was doing with pizza dough. I didn't really know what I was doing though, but now I do.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I know no one is opposed. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Every
Get
one of
better.
you. Thank you. Have a good night.
Get better soon, Doug.
Yes, please. You too.
You too, Rebecca.
I gotta shut off here.